Everybody, it is Romania Black, and we, if I adjust my screen here, are about to start the penultimate chapter of Run with the Wind. This is the race. The HAKONE-LEVEL is now. And we have quite a lot of pages left. So I know there's an epilogue, and I know that we have chapter 10 in the epilogue, which we'll do next week to round out our story. But oh my gosh. So yeah, we're at the race, and I'm really interested in seeing how they describe it in text format, because in the anime, each episode kind of built on a particular member or members' struggle in the leg of the race. Like there was an episode towards Shindo, and there was an episode for Yuki, and there was an episode for Haiji, an episode for Kakeru, an episode for King, and then the twins and Nico. So there were episodes dedicated to each and every member that was racing, but in novel form, there's not a chapter dedicated to each individual runner. So I'm really curious to see how they explain it. And also the race, or the novel so far, has been from Kakeru's perspective, and occasionally Haiji, and occasionally kind of third person. So I'm curious to see like what perspective we get, what they focus on. Is this going to be from Kakeru's point of view? How does this work? Are we going to switch between people? What are we going to focus on? What new stuff are we going to get that the anime didn't give us? So it's a lot to think about, and I'm really, really excited. So thank you for starting out your new year with me reading this book. It feels so timely, and it feels like the race has technically, by the time you watch this, already happened or is happening. So it's very intriguing, right? So yeah, the race is actually, if you're reading this on Patreon with me, the race is going to be going on as I read this story. Which is insane, right? Which is insane. And next week, if you're watching on YouTube, it'll be the week after and so on. But yeah, the timing of this could not have been more perfect to get this chapter on New Year's, the 9th chapter, and then have it at the same time the race is going on. It's so epic. It's so good. I love Run with the Wind so much, and I'm glad that you're reading this here with me. So I don't have much to say, but I do want to give a shout out to our patrons over on Patreon and the philanthropy tier to thank you all so much for helping me to be able to have the equipment to record this. Zero Anti-Zero gave me the book, so they get a special shout out for that alone. But thank you all so much on Patreon for supporting me as we go into this new year. So special shout out. We've got some new people with Alex Cornejo, Anime Annie, Be Happy, Bryant Reed, Dana, Damage3245, Danger Zone. I have to say it that way every time. Destiny Marie, Devorin, as well as Danny Donmai, Eric Ichu, Ghostly Turnip, Fisho, El Freya, Liam Poles, Linden, Matthew Palfinier, Murphew, Moroni W, Nancy Mass Art, as well as Nicholas, as well as Karen I, Sunspots, Shimoyama, Trails, Translucent Men, and Starman AA. Thank you so much for your support. I greatly appreciate it. All of my love. I've been wanting to dive into this chapter for a while now, and I've had to hold back because I was recording other things, but now's the time. So let's do it, shall we? I'm so excited, but we're going to start chapter 9 of Run with the Wind, Into the Distance. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. January 2nd, 7:45 a.m. It's 7:30 p.m. as I'm recording this right now, and you all are probably watching this on January 1st, so time zones, right? In just 15 minutes, the Tokyo Hakone round-trip college Ekiden race would begin. After the roll call 20 minutes before the start of the race, Prince made his way towards the underground passage for the subway. In the small hours of the morning, he could jog on the sidewalks above ground to loosen up. But now it was impossible. Countless people were swarming around the Yomiuri Shimbun head office building in Otamachi to catch a glimpse of the opening of the Hakone Ekiden. The throng of spectators, including the cheer squads of each university, the event staff, the Ekiden enthusiasts, who looked positively thrilled to see this time of year come round again, formed a continuous mass along the moat of the Imperial Palace, all the way from the Yomiuri Shimbun headquarters to the Wadakakura gate of the palace grounds. The deep beating of drums shook the air, accompanied by the school anthems of each university. Flags and banners flaunted their vivid colors in the cold and wind whipping through the office buildings. The crowd's energy and anticipation were mounting. "Where are you going?" Kiyose, who was accompanying Prince, stopped him. "You should be warmed up by now. Don't tire yourself out before the race even starts." "Yeah, but I get too anxious if I'm not running." Prince stamped his feet in place. "I didn't think there'd be this many people." Kiyose never imagined there would come a day when Prince, of all people, would voluntarily keep running. "I know, right?" He smiled at Prince to put him at ease. "You've practiced enough. You'll be fine." "Did you go to the bathroom?" "Multiple times." The side door to the Yomiuri Shimbun building was kept open for the athletes and staff to use. "Every time I go, it's jam-packed with people running the first leg." "That just means you're not the only one who's nervous. You have nothing to worry about." Kiyose led Prince to the back of the building so they wouldn't catch a chill from the strong gusts of wind. There were fewer people at the back, and two of them jogged lightly, side by side. Plastered on the wall was the final lineup of the race, announced at 7 a.m. that morning. "Rakudo didn't put Fujioka in the second leg, huh?" Prince remarked, puzzled. Rakudo had entered Fujioka among the backups. Though he was the captain and the strongest athlete on the team, no one had heard any rumors about him getting injured. Could it be that he was ill? All the other teams had been keeping a close eye out for his name, but it was absent from the final lineup for the first day of the race. "They're probably going to put him in the 9th or 10th leg," Kiyose said. Rakudo's stance seemed to be carefully assess the situation. If anyone could stop the team's successive victories at Hakone, it was Boso University. Boso's lineup made it clear they were betting on the first day of the race, the journey to Mount Hakone, to go for the win. With such a formidable list of athletes from Boso, even Rakudo would face a fierce battle on the way to Hakone. It was possible that Rakudo would let Boso come out on top for the first day and focus seizing the second day as well as the overall victory, which would be determined by the total times over both days. No doubt Rakudo would decide where to enter Fujioka based on the team's ranking at the end of the first day, as well as the time difference between Rakudo and Boso. What I love about this series is that it's not about the win, because in the anime it was just about it's about the journey. It's about the friends we made along the way, right? But it was really about their journey as this 10-person team to overcome the odds facing them, to grow as people and to grow as individuals, as a team, and to make it to the national final. Like that was the goal. And then once they were there, it's just trying to do their best to be the best representations of themselves. And that's something that I really like, because in most sports anime, it's like, oh, we've got to be the champion team, or we've got to make it to the top, or we're trying to be the best team in the tournament. And I feel like even though our boys at the Shikuseiso want to be the best, there is a foreknowledge in their mind that, yeah, these Boso and Rakudo are the ones that are going to win. We're just here to do our best and try to keep up with them. And I think that's really refreshing for a sports anime and something that you don't see often. So kudos to Run with the Wind. But for now, don't even think about Rakudo. Kiyose pressed a light hand on Prince's shoulder. Come on, let's go back to the starting line. Remember what I told you? Yeah, Prince nodded firmly, then took off the thick bench coat that hung below his knees. Upon seeing the black and silver Kansai uniform, the spectators moved aside. The cold didn't touch him anymore. As the first runner, he had the Tatsuki strung over his left shoulder and across his body. It was a black sash with Kansai University embroidered on it in silver. The plasterer's wife had spent weeks working on it, ever since the Kansai runners had passed the prelim. Prince touched the Tatsuki. Each of them would pass it on to the next, and all 10 of them would do everything they could to make sure it returned to this very spot tomorrow without breaking the link. Kiyose adjusted the length of the Tatsuki so it wouldn't get in the way when Prince ran. He tucked the extra part in the waistband of his shorts. Prince, I'm sorry I dragged you into this and made you come all this way, Kiyose said. The cheer squad started blaring music even louder. The staff shouted out, "Runners, on your mark!" That's not what I want to hear, Haiji, Prince grinned. Wait for me at Tsurumi. Prince handed the coat to Kiyose and went to stand at the starting line, along with the other 19 athletes running the first leg. Otemachi, Tokyo, 8 a.m. Weather, clear sky, temperature 34.3 degrees Fahrenheit, humidity 88%, wind 2.46 miles per hour from the northwest. A momentary hush fell over the crowd. The starting shot was fired. Prince broke into a run. There was no need to look back. The only way to forge the path of their journey, the first Hakone-Ekiden of Kansai University, was for him to press onward on this run. Oh, that little line between him and Kiyose is so cute. As Kiyose had predicted, the race began at a slow pace. Prince could see Tokyo Station on his left as he passed the Watakura Gate. The roar of the crowd crashed into him like a wave and broke away behind him, carried by the sharp winds that whistled through the skyscrapers. The group ran on the damp ground, still spread out into a horizontal line. Their pace was 3 minutes, 7 seconds per kilometer. It was the speed that Prince could keep up with. Perhaps because of the wide road, he felt like he wasn't moving forward no matter how much he ran. He could sense the nervous tension among the other runners around him, watchful for who would be the first to shoot ahead of the group, keeping each other in check. Prince willed them to stick to the slow pace. The wind gusts through the office buildings made it feel colder than it really was. Remembering Kyose's instructions, Prince shifted so that he was running right behind a slightly bulkier runner from Taito University. Prince couldn't spend too much energy on securing an advantageous spot. It would just be another burden for him on top of his slow speed. He quickly found a position that afforded him some protection from the wind and focused his attention on keeping up with the pack. The pace remained steady even as they crossed the intersection at Shiba-Gochome and entered Daiichi-Kaien. The group passed the 5-kilometer point at 15 minutes, 30 seconds. The team's coaches were bringing up the rear in their respective coaches' vehicles. At certain points in the race, the coaches were allowed to say a few words to the athletes, though their cards loudspeakers. Through them, once just after the first kilometer, then every 5 kilometers throughout each leg, and once more at the last kilometer. But none of the coaches gave any instructions until the runners had passed the 5-kilometer point. The others were also pulled forward. In the end, everyone remained in the pack. Everything hung on Rakugo Bridge. This unspoken understanding bound the entire group. Oh, wait, I skipped a page. Whoops! That was how taut the tension was among them. Even the coaches felt it would be reckless to speak too soon. The runners from Rakudo and Boso were contending for the lead position, but every time they tried to dart ahead, they were soon swallowed back into the rest of the group. The first leg was 21.3 kilometers long. And of course, Hakone-Ekiden had only just begun. If their spurts backfired and they ran out of steam, it would put a strain on their teammates who were running the next segments. This reluctance to make a big move held back the entire pack, which is perfect for Prince, right? Prince completely forgot about the escort car and the TV cameras. His entire being concentrated on moving forward, maintaining a veneer of composure as he clung desperately to the croup. Meanwhile, Kiyose had taken the JR train from Tokyo to Shinagawa and had just switched over to a Kaihin Express train. Carrying Prince's jacket in his arms, Kiyose jammed in his earbuds to catch the radio. He tuned into the sound of the TV coverage and discovered that the group was sticking together. Yes, he shouted in a small voice. The other passengers turned to stare at him, but he didn't care. The broadcaster and the commentator sound somewhat baffled as they discussed the slow pace of the first runners. Nothing's happened in the race so far, has it? I think the stronger athletes can step up their game and start running like they're going for a new record. Keep your crappy advice to yourself, Kiyose lashed out. He couldn't help it. Slow is good. No one make a move. Stay together as a group all the way to the finish. His cell phone rang. It was the landlord calling from the coach car. Kiyose picked up immediately, hoping Prince hadn't started falling behind. What should I do now, Haiji? The landlord drawled in a leisurely tone. Well, what happened? Well, we're almost at 10 kilometers. What should I say to Prince? Does he look like he's struggling? Kiyose gripped the phone. Nah, we just passed Yasuyama Bridge, but he's holding on tight. The pack's still going just the same. Everyone's running side by side. Then no need to say anything. The Yasuyama Bridge came just before the 8-kilometer point. The bridge was an overpass that formed a gentle slope along the railroad tracks. If the group was still together after that, it was highly likely that they would stay that way until they reached the most challenging part of the first leg, the Rakugo Bridge. Hang in there, Prince, Kiyose called to him in his head. But all I've done so far is sit here and say nothing, not a peep. How's that for being the coach? The landlord sounded bored. At this rate, I might as well be getting a lift to Hakone. If you just sit back and watch over us, that's more than enough. You can be our rock. Stay calm and dignified. If Prince starts struggling, encourage him. How? Don't tell me I got to sing the school song. I'm tone deaf. No coach in this day and age would sing the school song to hype up a runner, Kiyose sighed. Could you pass on a message to him from me? Tell Prince I have something to tell him, so he should come to Tsurumi even if he has to crawl his way to get there. It was at the 15-kilometer point that Prince heard Kiyose's message, bellowed through the loudspeaker in the landlord's gravelly voice. Something he wants to tell me. Well, let's hear it then. It was getting harder to breathe, but Prince flared up again. He managed to snatch the water bottle from Kansai's short-distance runner, who informed him, exactly 3 minutes for the past kilometer. The pace was rising. It was clear now. The crucial turn of the race would come at Rikoku Bridge at 17.8 kilometers. When they just passed 12 kilometers, it seemed there might be a twist in the race. The runner from Eurasia University darted forward, and the group began to stretch out in a line. But without missing a beat, Rakudo and Boso followed close behind him, and the others were also pulled forward. In the end, everyone remained in a pack. Everything hung on Rakugo Bridge. This unspoken understanding bound the whole group. Rakugo was a long bridge spanning 488.8 yards over Tama River. The road went uphill leading up to the bridge and turned downhill at its other end. By then, the runners would have already covered nearly 20 kilometers, making the elevation especially tough on their stamina. When they finally began their climb at Rakugo, Prince's legs suddenly felt like lead. He was shocked by how hard it felt to move. He gasped for breath and swung his arms, trying anything to propel himself forward. There was a shift in the rhythm of the group. The breathing of the stronger athletes fell quiet for an instant, and just as Prince sensed something was coming, the runner from Yokohama University put on a spurt. Boso and Rakudo followed suit. The group spread out in no time, stretching in a straight line. How do these people have that much energy left? Stunned, Prince could only look on as the top runner sprinted forward, farther and farther away. He wanted to chase after them, but it was impossible. The leaders reached the downhill part of the bridge and gathered even more speed. Prince remembered Kiyose's pre-race advice: stay calm. If you can hang on until Rakugo Bridge, the rest of the way won't make such a big difference in time. Just focus on finishing the run at your own pace. That's right. I'm still just a beginner. It doesn't matter how much the others can speed up. All I have to do, is keep running with every fiber of my being. The top runner was already 100 meters ahead of him, but Prince didn't give up. He held on to hope and ran with a dogged persistence. Did I just say still just a beginner? Does this mean I actually want to keep doing track? Even though I got roped into it and running hurts like hell? Prince let out a small laugh as he gasped for air. The soft, warm touch of sunrise fell on his face. What I love about this so far is that in the anime, we did get a lot of focus on Prince, but a lot of it was his own mental state and what he was thinking in the monologues in his head. We didn't actually get a lot with, I don't remember getting a lot with the hill and all of the geography of the run, which for Prince to do 3 minutes per kilometer is insane compared to where he started. Wild. At the Tsurumi relay station, Kakeru and Musa huddled together, staring intently at the screen of the portable TV. The owner of the electronics store in the shopping arcade had lent it to them for free. They're leaving Prince behind, Musa said sadly. When Prince slipped out of frame, Musa leaned forward as if he wanted to follow Prince with his eyes for as long as possible. But there shouldn't be that much time difference between him and the top runners. Kakeru watched intently, burning Prince's brave run into his memory. Then he looked up at Musa. You can close the distance in the second leg, Musa. Yes, I'll do my best. The first runners would start arriving at Tsurumi relay station soon. Musa pulled off his knit hat and scarf. It was 37.9 degrees Fahrenheit. While there was hardly any wind and it was sunny out, Musa felt bitterly cold. Following Kakeru's advice, he decided to run wearing arm warmers that covered his elbows down to his wrists. If he got too hot, he could take them off and go back to just his running uniform. Have you had enough water? Even if you're cold, you have to be careful not to get dehydrated during the race. If I drank any more, I'd have to pee and flee midway through, Musa laughed. It was the first time Kakeru had heard him use slang that way. Kakeru laughed with him. Yeah, that doesn't sound like you. The broadcaster's and the commentator's voice came from the portable TV. As for the second leg, each team has entered its ace runner, or a runner of that caliber. A whopping 11 runners out of the 20 hold records of 10,000 meters in under 29 minutes. We'll also see 4 international students in this segment. Manas from Boso University Kamani from Kofu Gakuen, Jomo from Sakyu, and last but not least, Musa from Kansai. At the mention of his name, Musa and Kakeru looked at the TV and saw themselves on the screen. They spun around in surprise. The TV crew crept up from behind. Musa smiled awkwardly at the camera. Kansai's Musa stands out from the others. An international student on a government scholarship, he studies in the science and engineering department, and believe it or not, before last spring he had 0 track experience. The Kansai team is taking on Hakone with just 10 members, but most of them are newcomers to the sport. And they managed to come this far. It's incredible. What a team. The camera cut to the studio, where the commentator was nodding eagerly. Training must have been insanely tough. There's a great deal of personality packed into the Kansai team. It's their first ever Hakone. Keep your eyes peeled for their performance. A commercial break started and the TV crew left. Being introduced on TV seemed to make Musa nervous again. Not good. I have to find a way to distract him, Kakeru said. Kakeru's cell phone went off. It was Shindo calling from the Odawara relay station where he was waiting for his turn to run in the 5th leg. Kakeru pressed the button to answer and handed the phone to Musa. Hey, Musa, I saw you on TV, Shindo said. His voice sounded rather muffled. How's your cold? Musa asked anxiously, and Kakeru brought his ear closer. Shindo had come down with a fever on New Year's Eve, and he still wasn't feeling well that morning. I'm fine, but what about you, Musa? Your nerves must be going haywire right about now. Yes, a little, Musa replied. Even miles apart, it was as if Shindo could sense how Musa was feeling. The strength of their bond amazed Kakeru. Oh, the strength of their bond, huh? Yeah, me too. I'm amazed as well. Listen, Musa, think of something fun, Shindo said through his stuffy nose. Once we're done with this, we'll finally get our New Year's holiday. I'm thinking of going back home during the winter break. Would you like to come with me? Can I? Isn't it a time for being with family? My parents are looking forward to meeting you. We do live in a village in the middle of nowhere, though, so there won't be much to do other than play in the snow. We can make yukidaruma. What's a yukidaruma? Oh, right, you've never made that one before. Well, then that settles it. Let's spend winter break at my place together. Yes, Musa nodded. Thank you, Shindo. When Musa hung up, all traces of doubt and fear had disappeared from his eyes. That girlfriend Shindo had, did she get invited to go back home and make yukidaruma with him? I don't think so. My ship is sailing. My ship is skating across the ice, ready to fly off into the nether sphere. Oh my God. The crowds on either side of the course cheered even louder. The first runners were coming into view. Kakeru and Musa approached the road. Kyosei came running from the direction of the Keikyu Surumi Ichiba station. When he found Kakeru and Musa, he let out a big sigh of relief. Oh, looks like I made it. He looked at Musa. How are you feeling? Better than ever, answered Musa boldly. Good. Kyosei checked Musa's face and his shoelaces for any sign of disarray. Prince will probably come in last, but don't let that get to you. Just run as you always do. That's good news for me. If I'm already last, it can't get any worse, Musa joked. Besides, I'm better suited to chasing than being chased. That's the spirit, Kakeru said, taking Musa's bench coat. So if you're more suited for chasing than being chased. Top Musa confirmed? I'm having too much fun with this, honestly. Okay, the Rakuto runner was the first to arrive at Surumi. The relay station was located in the front of a police Koban box along the side of Daiichi Keien Road. It was a plain, tree-lined road extending in a flat, straight line, so they had a clear view of the runners drawing closer. A staff member who had just received the news of the runners' positions hastily called out the names of the universities. The first leg runners would reach them in that order, so the second leg runners took their places in the changeover line and waited for their teammates. Rakuto's Tasuki passed from the first runner to the second. It was 1 hour, 4 minutes, 36 seconds into the start, since the start of the Otamachi. Next came Yokohama University, Boso, then Eurasia, almost at the same time. Since they all had been packed together for most of the route, it was an extremely close race. Musa did some stretches. Kakeru leaned out into the road. One after another, the runners of the first leg passed on the Tasuki, and the second leg runners hurtled away. Prince was still nowhere to be seen. 30 seconds had gone by since Rakuto's handoff. It's Prince! Kakeru shouted. He could make him out in the shadow of the escort car. The staff member called out to the remaining universities. Musa said, I'll go now, and stood at the changeover line. He held up his hand towards Prince. Prince was pushing on, swinging his arms wildly for momentum. When he noticed Musa ahead of him, Prince took off the Tsuki like he'd just remembered it was there. The rubber in his waistband snapped back against his side, giving him a light whip as if it wanted to spur him on. I'm almost there, Prince thought. Just a little more. Musa and Kakeru were screaming his name. Kyosei stood still next to Kakeru, waiting for Prince to reach them. Prince crossed the changeover line and passed the Tsuki he'd been gripping into Musa's outstretched hand. Musa was already running. The Tsuki linked Prince and Musa for a split second, then slipped away through Prince's fingers. Prince could hardly breathe. He couldn't even keep his eyes open. Who's panting so much? Is that me? He came to a halt and almost toppled over head first, but someone caught him in an embrace just in time. I take back what I said at Otamachi, Prince heard Kyosei say right next to his ear. What I really wanted to say was this. Thank you for coming with us all this way. That's better, Prince murmured. Oh, I can't believe Prince's journey is already over. I can't believe that's already ended for him. Oh, it's just going to be like one after another. So Shindo is sick, but man, the novel does not dramatize it like the anime does. The anime, you're just like, oh no. But here they're just like, oh, by the way, he's got a fever and a cold. And you're like, what? The novel just brings that out of nowhere. Like it's just, here's what you should know. We're going to save that drama for later. And I'm like, no. Kakeru and Kyosei took the Keikyu Express train to Yokohama, then the JR train to Odawara. Their team was understaffed, so they were circling ahead to Lake Ashi to be there for Shindo when he finished his part of the race. They were reluctant to leave Prince, who was still wiped out, but he urged them to go. Don't worry about me. Just go on to Hakone. I've already finished my run. I'll head to the hotel by myself when I feel ready to walk. Prince is like, go on, you two. Have your moment. Prince's job was to go to the hotel near Yokohama Station and keep an eye on the live coverage to follow things, how they stood in the race. Kyosei and Kakeru were to return to the same hotel that night to prepare for their runs the next day. Once they made sure Prince was hydrated and recovered enough to sit up, Kakeru and Kyosei left Tsurumi. The bench coat that Kyosei had carried over from Otamachi was back on Prince. Now Kakeru was carrying Musa's bench coat. It was meant to be for Shindo when he reached the finish line up on the mountain. The team was short not only on staff, but on gear as well. Oh my God, so Shindo got Musa's coat to wear for his leg? Shut up. Oh my God. Oh, okay. The Tokaido line was crowded with people, the spectators chasing after the Hakone runners and families on their way to shrines for Hatsumode, their first visit of the new year. Though the seats were mostly taken, Kakeru found an empty spot in the 4-seater booth and made Kyosei sit down. Kyosei pulled out a notepad and pen from his bench coat pocket. Prince's time. 1 hour, 5 minutes, 37 seconds, Kakeru answered, checking his wristwatch. Kyosei jotted down the numbers. That's 11 seconds difference from the Dochido University runner just ahead of him, and 1 minute, 1 second after Rakudo in the lead. There'll still be plenty of chances to make up for it. Prince put up a good fight, Kyosei said. I love the two of them together. When Prince handed the Kansai Tsuki to Musa at Tsurumi, he was last out of 20 teams. The select team of the Inter-University Athletic Union of Kanto, composed of athletes who ran well in the prelim but whose teams hadn't made the cut, wasn't counted as part of the team's rankings. For this team, only the times of the individual runners would remain as official record. So, strictly speaking, the Kansai team had finished the first leg in 19th place, but in effort, the team was last in the race. Still, just as Kyosei had said, the time difference wasn't significant, and there was still hope of turning things around. The slow pace of the first leg had been a blessing for Prince and the Kansai team. The race had only just begun. Kakeru had a portable TV, but it didn't get good reception on the train. Try this, said Kyosei, handing him a small radio. Kakeru was twisting around the knobs to try to pick up a station when Kyosei's phone rang. It was King, who was accompanying Jota at the Tatsuka relay station. Haiji, it's getting crazy out there. Look at the TV. We would if we could, Kyosei muttered. I want more of the two of them together on the train alone. Come on now. The star-studded second was plunging into a dramatic turmoil. Oh, Rakudo and Boso were running in the lead, but the runner from Manaka University, who'd taken the Suzuki in 9th place at the Surumi, was storming past the others and catching up to the top 2. In contrast, the runner from Yokohama University, who had been in 2nd place at Surumi, dropped back by a wide margin. A fierce three-way battle was unfolding between the leaders, each as determined and undaunted as the other. Meanwhile, there was also some dynamic movement among the group who followed in their wake. The runner from Jonin Bunka team, who had started off from Surumi in 18th place, was sprinting at a pace that approached the all-time course record for the second leg. The other runners around him also kept up that fast pace, despite not being desperate to not be overtaken or left behind. Musa, who had started last, was almost catching up to the runners from Dochido and Jonin Bunka. A student staffer standing on the side of the road held up a placard that read 1 kilometer. Musa checked his wristwatch. He'd run the first kilometer in 2 minutes, 48 seconds. It would be impossible to run the whole 23 kilometers of the second leg at this pace. He knew full well that he'd struggle in the latter half of the course, but he wouldn't be able to bring up their ranking if he faltered this early in the race. The Dochita and Jonin Bunka runners passed Tato, and Musa soon followed suit. That meant he'd already closed the 70-meter gap between Tato and himself since he'd set off from Surumi. The road was surrounded by huge masses of people. Musa thought, now I know what Kurayama no Hidodakari looks like. A crowd as big as a dark mountain. Rows upon rows of people filled the sidewalks as far as he could see, waving the small paper flags that the newspaper company, a co-sponsor of the event, had handed out. Everywhere he looked, he saw radiant faces, all of them cheering for the athletes who passed by in a flash. The excitement in the air far surpassed that surrounding the prelim and the Agio City half marathon. So this is the Hakone Ekiden. And this is what it means to run the second leg, the ace race. Musa was elated. He wasn't born in this country, and there were people who didn't even welcome his presence. He knew that. But what a place I'm in right now, in this moment where everyone's free and equal. We're all sharing the same time and space, both the runners next to me and the runners in the lead, though they're so far ahead that I can't even see them. After having endured such a long and intense training, they all transformed themselves into organisms whose sole purpose was to run. The same wind was whipping past all their bodies in that moment. Man, if Ryusei from Blue Lock was in Run with the Wind, he'd probably really enjoy this organic experience being described here. Oh my God. I also love that it's Musa running this leg of the race, because you have all this drama with all these guys like vying for records and trying to make the second leg like a record time. And Musa's just like, I just want to catch up. So we're on a good place. What Fujioka had said was right. If Musa had simply stuck to his studies in the science and engineering department, he wouldn't have been able to experience such a thrill or this sense of unity, or this stirring inside of him, like blood boiling in his veins, that rush known only to those who ran in earnest. The crowd roared even louder, and Musa finally realized he'd passed by Yokohama Station. He was 8.3 kilometers in. How did I run so far already? The elevated highway that had been obscuring the sky swept past, drawing a large curve and receding to his right. Pale sunlight fell onto him from the open sky. Musa kept running next to the Jonin Bunka and Dochido, feet striking the road that was now turning dry. Musa was on a roll, riding the rhythm. The fact that the landlord had instructed him to hold back his speed at the 5-kilometer point, and that Gonta Hill, the most challenging part of the second leg, was waiting ahead of him, had slipped out of his mind cleanly. He's going too fast. Kiyose pulled out his earbuds and called the landlord. Hello, from the Coachmobile. Did you tell Musa what I asked you at the 5 kilometers? Take it down a notch, Haiji. I did tell him it. In fact, but he just wouldn't listen. What am I supposed to do? Please tell him again to slow down at the 10-kilometer point. Kiyose hung up and leaned his head back on the hard seat of the train. With a sigh, he knit his brows and squeezed his eyes shut. He's too caught up in the moment. Kakeru placed a hand on the back of the seat, crouched down a little, and checked the view streaming past them outside. No sign of the sea yet. We're lucky there's no wind today. Kiyose opened his eyes and stared up at Kakeru, as if to say, laid back much? Oh, I wish I could have seen that in the anime. I'm sure Musa will realize before it's too late. Let's believe in him, Kakeru said, still gazing out the window. Kiyose pushed his earbuds back in and muttered, well, I guess that's all we can do. How? Kakeru and Kiyose are just so perfect because normally Kakeru would be the one that would be all like emotional and getting like, but in reality, it's Haiji. Haiji is having these moments where he's like, but we've worked so hard and I want them to do their best. And oh my God, I love dynamics where Kakeru's like, okay, you need to calm down. We got this. And I'm like, aren't you the one that's normally not calm? Oh my God. Of the 10 segments that make up the Hakone Ekiden, the second one, starting from Tsurumi and finishing at Totsuka, is the longest at 23 kilometers. It isn't just the length that makes it challenging. A hill called Gantazaka, which extends no less than 1.5 kilometers in a constant climb, awaits the runners 14 kilometers into the race. Gantazaka is followed by small ups and downs, and the last 3 kilometers of the course comes to another hill. As the longest course of the relay, and with many undulations towards the end, the second leg is worthy of the title star-studded second, both for its difficulty and for its drama. Runners who take on the challenge must excel not only in their running capability, but also in their indomitable spirit and perseverance. The course also requires a quick mind to grasp and respond to turns in the race, as well as the agility to adjust one's form in line with the ups and downs of the terrain. Musa ran the relatively flat part of the course at a good steady beat. After passing the Yokohama station, he was still carried by the same momentum he had when he went straight into Gantazaka. Then, 4 seconds into the climb, he realized, oh, it's Gantazaka. And suddenly felt much harder to lift his legs, as if someone had attached heavy weights to them. Though he'd been running abreast of Jonin Bunka and Dochido until that point, the gap between them grew wider and wider. Musa hastily tried to keep up with them, but he had a feeling it wasn't within his power. What have I been doing? Musa finally became aware of the cold wind blowing against his face. The arm warmers clung to his skin, soaked with sweat. It seemed I got carried away. Like a breath of wind coming in from an open window, swaying the curtains and clearing the dusty air inside, Musa's surroundings swept into his senses. The small corner stores dotting the side of the National Route 1 here and there, the deafening cheers of the spectators who formed a continuous wall along the course, a peaceful suburban scene during the New Year's holiday. Musa reminded himself of what he had seen on TV with Kakeru back at the Tsurumi relay station. 11 runners competing in the second leg could run 10 kilometers in less than 29 minutes. Jonin Bunka and Dochido were among them. If he tried to keep up with them head on, he'd only end up destroying himself. The twins had asked what fun there was in a sport with results that were predictable based on the athlete's credentials. But this is different, Musa thought. Even if plain numbers often made it clear who was the fastest runner, this wasn't a track race. This was an ekiden. I was given the Suzuki, and now I'm running not to break the link. An ekiden was a different story from a 10,000-meter track race where every runner would start running at once, going round and round on the flat track. The course he was running now, the 23 kilometers full of ups and downs, was merely 1/10 of the journey from Tokyo to Hakone and back again. His part of the race was nothing more than the first chapter of a story that was still being written. I shouldn't get ahead of myself. I should just run the way it's fit for a first chapter. In other words, stay calm and steady and bring up our position as much as I possibly can. Though I can't compete against the fastest runners in terms of speed, I can still pay close attention to how the race is unfolding and stay alert for any opportunities. First, I should hydrate myself properly at the 15-kilometer point, Musa decided. He thought it was freezing, but after running at such a high speed, he was drenched. And what next? Oh, yes. Musa recalled the warning that Kiyose had given him. Be cautious when you go down Gantazaka. If you've been going steady until then, you should be able to climb up the hill with the same momentum, but don't let that trick you into pelting the downhill. That's a surefire way to tire yourself out. Instead, you should restrain your speed a little when you go downhill to save your strength for later. The real challenge of the second leg, the part that decides whether you win or lose, is the uphill over the last 3 kilometers. Be patient till you get there and keep chasing the other runners. Understood, Haiji. Musa nodded to himself and concentrated on climbing Gantazaka. The highest point of the hill was nearly 183.7 feet above sea level. Yokohama Station was 8.2 feet above sea level, so that meant he was sprinting up an increase in elevation of more than 175 feet non-stop. The 15-kilometer point of the course came just before the peak of the hill. A short-distance runner wearing a Kansai tracksuit and a water supplier's bib signaled to Musa holding the event's official water bottle. In the brief moment when he ran alongside Musa to hand him the bottle, the water supplier shared some vital info. You're 18th right now. 7 runners in a group up ahead. You can do it. Musa nodded and slowly took a big gulp of water. He drank enough not to feel the weight in his stomach, then tossed the bottle to the side of the road. He was 18th now. That meant he had passed another runner after Tato while he was running on air. The cluster of 7 runners ahead of him must include Jonan Bunkin and Dochito. They'll likely keep pressing forward far beyond the rest. Who are the other 5 runners? Making use of Ganazaka's gradual downhill slope, Musa strained his eyes ahead of him. Dochito had a shot out of the pack, and the broadcasting car followed his trail as he began to leave the others behind. The team support vehicles were busy maneuvering their way to their respective athletes to give the instructors instructions for the 15-kilometer point. Musa couldn't make out the runners very well because of the cars blocking his view, but it did look like several people were running neck and neck. Musa moved slightly closer to the center line of the road. From this angle, he could see one of the runners in the shadow of a car wearing a vertical green and white striped uniform of Eurasia University. Make sure I got... Oh, there we go. Eurasia. If I recall, they left Surumi in 4th place. It was then that Musa realized there had been a major upheaval in the team's positions. If the Eurasia runner had dropped so far behind, he must be struggling badly. Perhaps he was sick or the pressure was crushing him. Whatever the reason, he hadn't managed to find his rhythm. The broadcast vehicle moved farther and farther ahead. Dochita and Jonah Bunka must have left the group behind. Musa judged it would be feasible for him to catch up with the remaining 5. He could overtake them. Don't rush it. Close the distance bit by bit. The landlord's raspy voice came from the coach car behind him. Musa, don't tell me you got your balls scrunched up stiff like some pumped up racehorse. The loudspeaker fell quiet for a few moments. The monitoring staff riding in the same car must have warned Tazaki about language. With a cough, the landlord resumed. Do you remember what Haiji told you, Musa? If you do 3 somersaults right now. How do we end up with this wacky guy as our coach? Musa laughed. The laugh made him relax, and he could feel his thoughts becoming unclouded. Musa raised his hand lightly and gave a thumbs up to the coach car. Oh my God! Oh, dramatic! At the Totsuka relay station, Jota and King sat together on a tarp, watching the broadcast on their portable TV. They don't show much of the lower-ranked teams, do they? I wonder how Musa's doing, King said. Well, no wonder. There's just too much happening with the top runners. On the screen, the Manaka runner had just begun to leave Rakudo and Boso behind. I'm sure Musa will pull through. Just then, the team rankings at the 15 kilometers flashed on the screen. Kansai was 18th. If they discounted the selected team, Kansai was now in 17th place. The camera switched to the battle among the lower-ranked teams. Musa was steadily gaining the 5 runners ahead of him. I told you! All right! Jota and King gripped each other's hands in excitement. Come on, Jota, we gotta get moving. Musa might get here faster than we think. It's better for me to stay still before a race, I think. Jota had finished his warm-up jog a long time ago, so he stuck to doing stretches with his legs out in front of him. By the way, how's your job hunt going? Well, why would you bring that up now? I'd get too nervous if I don't talk about something else. You're gonna make me break out in a cold sweat, King sulked. But for the present, it was his mission to protect the peace in Jota's mind before his turn in the race. Grudgingly, he answered, it's not going. You think I've got time for that with all this running? Seriously, what are you going to do? A gap year and keep hunting? I might have to do a 4th year again. King hugged his knees and looked up with a sigh. A feathery cloud hung in the wintry blue sky. I hope my folks let me. His sigh came out in a small, wispy cloud, momentarily floating in the air before melting away. Oh, do-over. Jota drew up his knees like King and rocked back and forth. If you're going to stay, let's run a Hakone next year, too. You idiot. We haven't even finished this one. You're already on to next year? I'm not gonna. I'd never find a job. King shot down Jota's suggestion. Then after a pause, he murmured, You think we're going to do it again next year? I will. Jota rose to his feet. Why wouldn't I? Jota's eyes blazed, more serious than ever before. This guy. He's going to do it, King thought. The fervent fire in Jota, burning brighter as he waited for his turn, ignited King too. All right. King got up and stretched his knees. Well, let's do a light jog for the end, Jota. The two of them started running to and fro, weaving through the crowd and around the bustling relay station. Oh, I love it. Yes. Musa was running up the hellish hill, stretching over the last 3 kilometers of the course. The only thing that kept him going was the relentless determination. He overtook the Eurasia runner just before the hill. Now he was surrounded by the runners from Tokyo Gakuen, Akebono, and Kita Kanto universities at the select team. He couldn't see who was running ahead of them. He had no idea whether the others were so far ahead that they simply were out of sight or whether they were obscured by the event vehicles and the shape of the terrain. In any case, all he could do was keep an eye on the movements of the 4 runners ahead of him and around him. If any of them made a move, he'd respond without missing a beat. He could sense that his competitors had the same thing on their minds. They wanted to shoot out of the pack if they could, to pass on the Tsuki of the next runner as fast as humanly possible. All 4 of them were waiting for the right moment to strike. Musa had come so far. He didn't want to be the first to fall behind of the group, especially now that they were so close to the finish. He had already reached his physical and mental limits, but pure tenacity made him cling onto the same speed. The Totsuka relay station was midway up the hill, just 500 meters left. The noise barrier obstructed his view to the left, but the growing number of spectators almost overflowing from the sidewalks told him the relay station was drawing near. He noticed the select team runner in front of him was sweating even more than he was. All the runners around him were breathing heavily, and so was he, of course. This was his only chance. Musa swerved around the select team runner and emerged as the leader of the pack. He poured everything he had left in that burst of speed. As long as he could cross the line and pass the Tsuki to Jota, it didn't matter where Musa collapsed on the spot. Though I'm nowhere near the course record, this is the best run I could ever muster now. It's time for me to show what I can do and throw everything I've got into the final stretch. His chin pulled up and his form became ungainly, but it was no time to think about how he looked. He could see the changeover zone. He could see Jota slowly raise his hand. Musa leaned in, thrusting forward his upper body and sprinted even harder. He didn't know when he pulled it off his shoulder, but Musa found himself gripping the Tsuki in an outstretched fist. Ran like a true ace, Jota said, taking the Tsuki and slapping Musa's arm. Musa heard Jota's light footsteps bounding away from the asphalt where he collapsed. When he came to, he was lying on a tarp. There seemed to be in the parking lot of a ramen shop and a secondhand car dealer. Still foggy, he thought, I didn't think the relay station would be in such a humdrum place. The place was buzzing with the event staff, the runners who'd just arrived and their teammates who were there to support them. It seemed Musa hadn't been out for too long. You awake? Musa's field of vision was filled with King's face, who looked like he was about to cry. You fought hard, Musa. King filled him in on everything that had happened. Musa had come out on top in the group at the end of the course, reaching Totsuka in 13th place. He'd overtaken 7 teams and had run the whole 23 kilometers in 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 14 seconds. Out of the 20 athletes who ran the leg, he got the 12th best time. Oh. The Kansai team was now in 13th place overall. They were 27 seconds behind Shinsai University in 12th place and only 6 seconds ahead of Tokyo Gakuen in 14th. The team still couldn't let their guard down. But Musa's charge had gave them hope. You should have seen Jota, King sniffed, rubbing his nose, which was red from being out in the cold for so long. He got so pumped up watching you run. I'm glad. So I managed to put in a good run after all. Musa nodded without a word, a tremor in his lips. He thought if he opened his mouth to speak, he wouldn't be able to stop the tears from pouring out. Oh, Musa! I can't believe Musa's leg is done now! Oh my God! Oh, that was so good. That was so good. Each of these legs are so good. They're getting better and better. And I love the thread of Kakeru making it to Shindo. Like, I wonder if that's going to be the end of the chapter, is us getting halfway to Shindo. If that's going to be the end of the chapter. Oh my God. Kakeru and Kyosei got off the train at JR Odawara Station and were walking through the station to switch to the Hakone-Tozen Railway. Okay, got it. Thanks. Get some rest. Kyosei finished the call with King and clapped his phone shut. He says Musa is awake now. They're about to head over to the hotel in Fujisawa. That's good, Kakeru said, relieved. He'd been worried sick since he saw Musa crumple to the ground at Totsuka on TV. King had been much too in a panic to answer any calls, but eventually he rang to let them know that Musa was all right. Yeah, I can imagine just seeing him collapse on TV and Kakeru being like, oh my God. Also, the fact that he snapped his phone shut also gives you a nice little indication of the time zone, of the time frame this was wrote in, because it was portable TVs, flip phones, Definitely like early 2000s is what it seems like. Okay. Kiyose and Kakeru bought the tickets and went through the gates. Kiyose checked the departure times on the electronic notice board. They had about 10 minutes until the Odakyu line to Hakone-Level arrived. Plenty of time to have all sorts of fun, these two. Didn't you have to call Jota before he ran? Kakeru asked. Well, the twins should be fine on their own. Knowing them, they'd call me if they were worried about anything. Fair enough, Kakeru thought. On the platform, he saw some people dressed up in special kimonos for the New Year's holiday. Our biggest problem right now is Shindo's condition. Kiyose pulled out his cell again to make a call before the train arrived. Yuki? Kakeru asked and Kiyose nodded. When the call went through, Kiyose said, "It's me." Kakeru reached over and pressed a button on Kiyose's cell phone and put it on speakerphone. Like getting into space and pressing the button. He figured no one would mind since there was enough bustle around them to drown out their voices. Kiyose cocked his head to one side, wondering what Kakeru had just done. Kakeru pulled Kiyose's hand so he held the phone up in front of him. How's Shindo? Kiyose asked. I don't know, Yuki answered. I can't see his face and he's refusing to let me check his temperature. Not well, that's for sure. What do you mean you can't see his face? Kiyose said with a frown. You better be keeping him company. Yuki was supposed to be with Shindo at the Odawara relay station, waiting for Shindo's turn to run in the fifth leg. Kiyose sounded impatient. They were so close now, but they couldn't go see Shindo in person. He's right next to me, Yuki said, but he's got his face half covered with a towel. Plus, he's wearing masks over the towel. One normal mask for colds and another one for hay fever. You know, those big ones that pop out like a Tengu spirit. So I really can't see if he looks red or pale. Let alone much of his face. Hey, can you breathe okay in there, Shindo? Apparently, Shindo was subjecting himself to full quarantine mode so that he wouldn't infect Yuki with anything. There was a shuffle on the other end as Yuki handed the phone to Shindo. Hello? said Shindo. His voice sounded low and muffled, like some kidnapper demanding a ransom. How high is your fever? Kiyose asked, getting straight to the point. But Shindo didn't budge. I'm totally fine. I don't have a fever, he insisted. Is Kakeru there? Kakeru stepped closer to the phone. Yes. If you're able to, could you get some masks on your way here? I'll leave the ones I have on now with Yuki. For someone who doesn't have a fever, you're acting rather cautious, Kiyose commented. How come Haiji can hear me? Shindo sounded unsettled. You're on speakerphone, Kakeru explained in his head. Don't worry, I'll get some, he said out loud. Drink as much as you can, Shindo, Kiyose instructed. Even if it means you wet your pants mid-run, that's better than getting dehydrated. I'd rather not do either. Shindo laughed and then hung up. Staring at his cell, Kiyose remarked, well, quite a useful feature. Didn't you know you could do that? Kakeru said, switching off the speaker. I never even noticed. What did he think that button was for? Kakeru wondered as he ran to the kiosk on the platform. By the time he brought the masks and returned to Kiyose, the train to Hakone-Level was just coming in. Kiyose got on, looking a little downcast. I wish I could tell him he could bow out if it's too much. Stowing away the masks in his pocket, Kakeru followed Kiyose onto the train in silence. I know, I feel so bad. I'm like, they have to have Shindo run whether he feels good or not. But I love that Kiyose didn't know what the speakerphone button was. And then Kakeru's in his face. He's like, what's happening? Like, oh my gosh. For Jota, his twin little brother Joji had always been the other half of his soul. I've been wanting more with the twins for so long. I hope we get this with both of them. Their parents never mistook one son for the other. When they were young, the brothers often played pranks on grown-ups, Jota pretending to be Joji and Joji Jota. But their parents never failed to tell the boys apart. I wonder how they did that, Jota thought. There were times back when even Jota had looked at his own reflection in the mirror and gotten mixed up between Joji and himself. Their parents never compared them either. They treated the boys as two completely separate individuals. In their parents' eyes, it didn't make sense to compare their sons. It was natural for their parents to think of their children that way, a given. But when he got older, Jota learned that there were some parents out there who couldn't adopt that stance. Some parents compared their children with each other and regarded them as possessions. Jota was glad his parents were never like that. Having the same face didn't mean they shared the same soul. It was thanks to the way that their parents had treated them that Jota would accept the fact as though it was the most natural thing in the world. Jota loved his twin brother simply as another person, a separate individual who was also his closest companion. Jota and Joji always had been together. They shared a bedroom, went to the same schools, played soccer side by side. They'd fought as many times as they made up, and they hung out with the same friends. Jota knew mostly everything there was to know about Joji. His favorite foods, the little mole on his right ankle, and when he had his first kiss and with whom. He also knew Joji's personality was totally unlike his own. Jota and Joji had many friends. People around them probably saw them as cheerful, fun-loving brothers. And that was true, and Jota had no objections to being seen that way, but he felt those adjectives didn't quite fit his own personality. Joji was more artless than Jota. Joji could brighten up a room and make people relax by being there. Whether he was angry or happy, he showed his emotions in an honest, straightforward way without any hidden motives. Jota didn't wear his heart on his sleeve as much as Joji did. Sometimes he was calculating. He behaved in a certain way because he thought people would like him more. People liked Joji, carefree, easygoing, living in the moment. They were harder to come by. This was the one thing that made Jota feel even more affectionate towards his brother. Joji probably doesn't know it yet, Jota thought, but it's about time we started going our separate ways. We've done everything together our whole lives, but we can't keep going like this forever. Jota crossed the Hamasuka intersection and continued southward, entering the Shonan coastal road. As soon as he turned into it, he felt the wind blowing straight into his face. In studies and in sports, Jota and Joji were practically at the same level. So naturally, they had gone to the same senior high, and they'd both been regulars on the soccer team, but running was different. Joji was more cut out to be a runner. Right now, there wasn't such a big gap between their speeds, but because Jota knew Joji better than anyone, he could see it already. This is probably as far as I can go, but Joji will get even faster. He can reach a world that I never could see. He has all the makings of a great runner, and besides, it looks like he just can't get enough of running. Loved by many, Joji had a big heart, spacious enough to feel the same affection for everyone, but when it came to running, Jota was surprised by how much passion and tenacity Joji had shown for it. At first, Jota had assumed Joji would get bored of track soon enough, but Joji kept running. Day in and day out, even Kiyose didn't seem to notice, Jota sometimes knew that Joji would sneak out of the house late at night to practice by himself. He'd slipped out of his futon, careful not to wake Jota, and jogged for about an hour before coming back. When the twins were alone in their room, Joji constantly brought up Kakeru. He'd rattle off comments like, well, Kakeru's run was really on fire today, and I wonder how I could run like that. Eager to inch closer to Kakeru, he'd strike a pose on the tatami and ask Jota to check his form. Joji's eyes shone bright in moments like these. Jota and Joji often got into it with Kakeru, partly because they were in the same year and didn't have to hold anything back. To Jota, Kakeru seemed naive and single-minded to a fault. Sometimes this irked Jota and made him lash out. But Joji looked up to Kakeru. He locked horns with Kakeru only because he was too shy to admit how much he admired his teammate. You're all grown up now, Joji. Jota felt both lonely and proud. His little brother's biggest rival had always been himself. Each of them had sought to surpass the other, and they'd stimulated each other in the way that for as long as Jota could remember. But now Joji had finally discovered another rival, a model to aspire to in Kakeru. If they hadn't tried track, they'd have never known. They could have kept going together for much longer, with their sights set on the same things, but this is where we part, Joji. Jota had kept running this far, pulled along by Joji's zeal. With the Chikuseso residents, the twins had succeeded in reaching Hakone. Jota was sure, would keep climbing up, striving to attain what lay beyond, reaching beyond the point that Jota would never be able to cross for that realm in the far distance. Oh well, I don't mind, Jota thought. No matter what happens, Joji will always be my little brother. I've got to embrace it. Let him leave the nest and become independent. All I can do is run the best I can right now and give him a parting gift. He is about to embark on a long journey to seek new heights. Jota hoped that one day Joji might win. Though it might take many years, Joji could become a runner as good as Kakeru or even better, an invincible runner, faster and stronger than anyone else. Jota didn't know what he himself would be doing then, but he was sure about one thing at least. He would be rooting for his little brother from the bottom of his heart, just as he was now. He came to the part of the coastal route that was bordered by a long grove of black pines and broadleaf evergreens, which functioned as a barrier against sand blowing from the beach. The trees cut off the ocean from view. Now only the salty smell and the wind told him he was running near the sea. They say that this leg is boring, Jota thought, but it's actually brutal. Most people saw the third leg between Tatsuka and Hiratsuka as an in-between stage. The route turned south from National Route 1 at Higashi-Matano. After passing Fujisawa Station at 7-kilometer point, the course continued through nondescript roads downtown. It turned right at Hamasuka intersection, headed down National Route 134, commonly known as the Shonan Coastal Road, where the same monotonous scenery continued for some time. Since there weren't many houses along the road and it was far from any train stations, this was one of the sections of the Hakone race where there were some large gaps in the line of spectators. For Jota, it was tough to run where nobody was watching. The more people looked to him in expectation, the more his motivation was boosted. Another aspect that made this course challenging was the contrast in terrain. The route leading up the coastal road had small ups and downs, whereas it had become almost completely flat and linear along the sea. It was 42.3 degrees Fahrenheit. He was still running against a headwind. Since it was a clear, bright day, Mount Fuji might have been visible in the distance, but he couldn't spare any energy to look for it. Yep, Jota thought. Hakone-Ekiden is definitely better on TV. You should watch it when you're lazing around at home and pecking at some osechi or something. And around the third leg, you can take in the aerial shot from the helicopter, a panoramic view of the sea, the never-ending road, Mount Fuji. That's the way it should be. It was a serene, magnificent scene, which stirred up that New Year's holiday spirit. But now that he was running it himself, Jota couldn't believe how much of a grind it was. After grabbing the Tsuki from Musa at Totsuka Relay Station, Jota's Hakone-Ekiden started off with an uphill climb from the outset. The runner from Kita Kanto University, who'd received the Tsuki in 17th place at Totsuka, had stormed past Jota. But he didn't mind. The Tokyo Gakuen runner, who'd started 6 seconds after Jota, also outstripped him, but he kept his cool. Running on hills isn't for me, he thought. He knew that the Kita Kanto athlete was a top-tier runner, even among all the third-leg contestants. Jota had had a thorough look at the data on his fellow runners that Yuki had shared with them. It would have been a losing battle if he tried to keep up with that runner. Getting bullheaded would only land him in trouble. As for the Tokyo Gakuen runner, this guy was already panting as he went by. I can catch up to him later and turn the tables, Jota thought. Jota could see far ahead on the coastal road. He already had a clear view of the 4 runners in front of him. Tokyo Gakuen, Shinsei, and 2 more who seemed to be falling behind in the ranks. Maebashi Institute of Technology and Jonin Bunka. At the 15-kilometer water point, the Kansai student yelled, "You're gaining on them!" All right, I can do it. Jota felt a fresh wave of energy flow down through his legs. The landlord, who'd been quiet until then, shouted from the coach vehicle, "Jota, are you concentrating? Is your head wandering off somewhere?" It has been, about Joji and stuff. How do you know? Is my form off? Here's a message from Haiji. The last kilometer's where you've got to stand your ground and pull through. Don't let anything throw you off. Whatever you see, over and out. So Haiji was behind it. It made sense to Jota now. No way the landlord would have noticed. Haiji must have been watching on the portable TV and decided to give Jota a little kick. But what did he mean about throwing me off? What's waiting ahead? Jota felt a thrill run through him. Kiyose knew him so well. He just couldn't resist going to check for himself whenever he heard that there was something stimulating to be seen. He could rebel against Kiyose all he wanted, but in the end, Kiyose had Jota dancing in the palm of his hand. It got on Jota's nerves a little, but it also made him laugh. First, he passed Tokyo Gakuen and Shinsei. At 18.1 kilometers, came to the Shonan Bridge over the Sagami River. The sand barrier grove came to an end, and Jota could finally see the vast expanse of the sea out of the corner of his eye. Wild white waves broke near the mouth of the river, where fresh water and seawater clashed and swirled into one. Jota was almost catching up to Jonin Bunka and Maebashi. He decided to strike once he crossed the bridge, and then he turned his attention even farther ahead. And there he was, the runner from Tokyo Taiku. Jota could see his blue uniform lined with light blue, a uniform that had been too far ahead in the race to see until now. Jota couldn't reach the runner yet, but he could get nearer. He could close the distance as much as possible and then pass it on to Joji. Jota thought of Sakaki, the Totai member who tortured Kakeru and went out of his way to provoke the Chikuseso team. Sakaki had always infuriated Jota. Jota felt sorry for Kakeru. who clammed up in front of his old teammate, unable to think of a good comeback. I may be the type of guy who holds grudges and obsesses over stuff, but at least I'm not a sneaky asshole like Sakaki. I don't have anything against the rest of the Totai team, but as long as Sakaki's one of them, that makes them our rival, our enemy, who deserves to be clobbered to the ground. Of course! We're nothing like Sakaki. We'll take them head on. Fight it out in the race. Jota charged forward, mounting an aggressive attack. He came neck and neck with Jonin Bunka and Maibashi. They didn't let him pass so easily. But Jota didn't care about those two anymore. His attention was focused solely on the runners farther ahead, Kikui and Totai. Jota saw the sign marking 20 kilometers. The 21.3 kilometer course of the third leg was coming to an end. Jota suddenly recalled Kyose's words. What's that thing he was talking about? The thing that might surprise me? When he dove into the final kilometer, he realized what it was. The last part of the course was a straight road. So the Hiratsuka relay station rose into view. When there was a target in sight, it made him feel as if he wasn't getting any closer. No matter how much he ran, keep calm, hang tight, pull away from the runners next to me, and pass on the Tsuki to Joji as fast as I can. Make every second count. But something else happened that startled Jota even more. Around the 200 meter to the relay station, he noticed Hanako on a bicycle, speeding along the sidewalk to keep up with him. She was pedaling with all her might behind the rows of spectators. Jota, you're almost there! Her voice rang out over the commotion. Hana never tells us to keep going or give it all you've got because she knows we're already working as hard as we can. Why does she root so hard for us? Jota pictured her smiling up at him, and he almost blurted out, "Oh!" Like a divine revelation. The realization descended upon him. Could it be that Hana likes me? When he thought about the things in that light, it made sense why Yuki and Nico smirked suspiciously whenever Hanako came to Chiyuse, and why Musa was so insistent that the twins see her home every single time. But hang on, it was always me and Joji taking her home together. And Anna looked perfectly happy with that. So, then, which of us does she like? Jota's head was spinning in excitement and confusion. He was still too wrapped up in this tangle of thoughts to notice when he left Jonin Bunka and Maibashi in the dust. Okay, part of me does think that maybe Jota is the one that might end up with Hana, only because, and this might be just the BL shipper in me, that Joji seems more interested in, chasing his rival Kakeru, and I don't know, The shipper in me is like, is Jota maybe the one that would end up with her? But, oh, I love all the stuff we're getting with Jota, though. Like, it's so good. Oh! Not long before, Joji and Nico had been stunned as they stood at the Hiratsuka relay station, gaping at Hanako careening away on a bike. She's gone, Joji remarked. Yep, she's gone, Nico agreed. Hanako had been waiting with them at Hiratsuka, but when she caught onto the fact that Jota was coming closer, she flew off. She practically commandeered a bicycle from one of the spectators, saying, "I'll give it back in a second." She's a nice girl, huh? Nico said. Before she went, Hanako had been as thoughtful as ever, making sure Joji felt comfortable before his race. With Nico's assistance, she provided Joji with drinks and blankets. And when Joji was doing stretches, she chatted with him to take his mind off the race and ease his nerves. Frank and good-natured, Hanako had already won Nico over. He felt like a father, nodding approvingly at the girl who was to marry his son. The question is, though, Nico wondered, scratching his stubble, which twin does she like? Since Hanako had chosen to keep Joji company at the relay station, Nico had surmised that she liked Joji, but when she went off to cheer for Jota too, she didn't just go off, she flew off, like she couldn't keep still, even snatching a bike from a stranger. So which one is it, or could it be both? Such thoughts were what prompted Nico to comment, "She's a nice girl, huh?" All smiles, Joji only said, "Yeah, she sure is." "Are you kidding me? He's still not getting it." Nico sighed and turned his attention back to the top runners who were arriving at Hiratsuka, Manaka, Rakudo, and Boso in that order. Before the race began, everyone had expected the first day to be a bitter battle between Rakudo and Boso, but they were now getting ambushed by the Manaka team, which was putting up a surprisingly good fight. It made the crowd go wild. The next runners were fast approaching behind them. "Look, it's Jota! He's passing them!" Joji cried out. "Let's see," Nico said, leaning into the road. Jota, in his black and silver uniform, had just overtaken Jonin Bunka and Maibashi. He was sprinting so fast that Hanako was struggling to keep up on the bike. Meanwhile, the other runners were handing off their Tsuzukis one after the other. "Oh yeah, he's running all right." Nico slapped Joji on the back. "You're up next. Are you ready?" "Bring it on." "I can't let Jota steal the whole show." "I'm gonna run, baby," Joji said brightly, loosening up his ankles. There was still a good deal of distance between Kansai and the two teams ahead of them, Kikui and Totai. Be careful not to push too hard just because Jota climbed up the ranks. It's not going to be easy for someone with your ability and time to overtake them. Just count yourself lucky if you can narrow the gap. Gotcha, Joji nodded, and stepped on the handoff line at the staff's announcement. Nico stood by, awaiting Jota's arrival and Joji's departure. Totai came into the Hirotsuka in 9th place, 3 hours, 19 minutes, 58 seconds after they'd set off from the Otomachi. 10 seconds later, Kikui handed off the Tsuzuki in 10th place. And then 15 seconds later, after Kikui, Jota passed on the Kansai Tsuzuki to Joji. They were 3 hours, 23 minutes, 23 seconds into the race. The Kansai team had hauled themselves up to 11th place. Jota had left a remarkable record of running 21.3 kilometers in 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 23 seconds, the 10th best time in the third leg group. Nico, however, was too much in shock to celebrate Jota's feat. Jota, running towards them with a spine-chillingly fierce look, had exclaimed, just as he was handing over the Tsuzuki, "I think Hana likes us." "What? No way!" Joji yelled as he sprinted away. Nico felt pricked all over by funny looks people were giving them. "Hey, are you guys taking this seriously?" he grumbled, wrapping his arms around Jota's shoulders. He dragged them off to hide in the back corner of the relay station away from the stairs. "Of course we are," Jota retorted, gasping for breath, his hands on his knees. "How come you never told us?" "That Hana's crushing on you guys?" "Yeah, or am I just imagining it?" "Probably not, but man, why now? Talk about bad timing. What if Joji gets distracted?" "What might distract him? Did anything happen?" Nico and Jota turned around upon hearing the voice clear as a bell. There, Hanako was, having returned the bike to its owner. She wiped the sweat off her forehead and beamed at Jota. "You were amazing." Jota, who was squatting on the ground, turned bright red down to the nape of his neck. He got up awkwardly and mumbled, "Thanks." He couldn't even look her in the face. Nico scratched his head at a loss. "Seriously? If Jota's like this, chances are Joji's not much better." "Looks like it's time to call Haiji," he said. Hanako gave Nico a quizzical look. "Oh my god." I'm like, "Yeah, well, are you sure you should say that to Joji? Is that going to distract him? I remember this sort of thing happening in the anime, but oh my god." Maybe Hana's into a polycule. Maybe she's into both of them. Who knows? Kakeru and Kiyose were waiting in front of the Hakone-Yumoto station for the bus to Lake Ashi. They had to go all the way up Mount Hakone before traffic was restricted for the race. There was a long line of cars going up the road up the mountain. Clearly, they weren't the only ones who had thought ahead. "We're 11th, Haiji!" Kakeru turned up the volume on the portable TV, trying to stamp away the cold. The broadcaster sounded animated too. "Monaka University has come out on top at the Hirotsuka relay station, passing on their Tsuzuki in first place. Rakudo University, with their sights set on seizing their 4th consecutive victory at Hakone, came in second with the relay with a delay of 19 seconds. In third place is Boso University, with only 50 seconds separating them from the leading team. Wow, what a plot twist in the third leg, don't you think, Yanaka?" Yanaka, the commentator, took over. "Oh yes, we were expecting this race would be a one-on-one battle between Rakudo and Boso, but now Monaka's entering the fight. I'm excited to see how things are going to play out in the 4th leg, then the 5th up the mountain." The Hakone regulars are all lined up from 4th to 10th places. Dochido, Daiwa, Kofu, Gakuen, Saikyo, Kitakanto, Tokyo Taiko, and Kikui. Any one of the teams could rise to the remaining legs of Mount Hakone and come out victorious for their return journey tomorrow, even the overall race. "And we can't take our eyes off of Kansai University in 11th place," Yanaka said, unable to hide his enthusiasm. "They were last in the first leg, but they've been steadily climbing up the ranks ever since. Even though they were only 10 members on the team, every single one of them has nerves of steel. They did a great job of matching each runner to the course that suits his particular skill set. We're only 3 legs in now." In fact, it's not out of the realm of possibility they could secure seed rights for next year, or even rise to higher ranks. Not to belabor the point, but who would have thought this dark horse could put up such a strong fight? Yanaka, the Kansai University, has 3 four-year students on their team. even if they can win seed rights. What would happen to them next year? They wouldn't have enough members. That's a fair point, Yanaka chuckled. It's extremely rare that a team with only 10 members competes in the Hakone-Ekiden. This is the only time it's happened since the race has been televised, at least. Who knows? If they get seed rights, they might have to ask the fourth years to repeat their year. Well, desperate times, the broadcaster quipped. I'm just kidding. But I don't think it'll be a problem, Yanaka said, his tone growing a little more serious. After their impressive performance in the race, I'm sure there'll be new students who want in. There are benefits to being part of a strong team at a prestigious institution, but it's also nice to have universities like this where young people who've never run before are given a chance. After all, the whole purpose behind the Hakone-Ekiden is to foster runners who can hold their own on the international level and to expand the scope of long-distance track world in Japan. This guy knows what he's talking about, Kyosei murmured at the TV. Who is he? Kakeru asked. You really are clueless, aren't you? Yanaka was an ace runner at Daiwa University about 30 years ago. He ran in the Olympics, too, representing Japan in the marathon. And now he's an advisor for a corporate track team, I think. Huh. I guess when they've taken on the world, it shows in what they say, Kakeru thought. The camera switched to the fourth leg runners, zooming in on Joji. Why is Joji grinning like that? Kyosei said. He does look kind of goofy. Come to think of it, Joji's face was bright red at Hirosuka, maybe from the effort? Or Jota's. He's not the type to get nervous like that either. I wonder what happened. Just then, Kyosei's phone rang. This time, Kyosei himself switched on the speakerphone as soon as he picked it up. Hey, Haiji, we've got a bit of a situation here. It was Nico. What's wrong? Kakeru blurted out. Oh, Kakeru, did I call your number by accident? No, this is my phone. Kyosei didn't bother explaining the speaker mechanism. Did something happen? So Kakeru can hear everything I say, huh? I don't know if I should say it then. Well, never mind. Out with it already, Kyosei demanded. Picking up on the irritation in Kyosei's voice, Nico gave in. It's the twins. They figured out that Hana has feelings for them, so as you can imagine, Jota's in La La Land coming back from the race, and Joji's in La La Land going into it. Kyosei glanced at Kakeru. Why is he looking at me? Kakeru wondered. Now they figured it out? Kyosei sighed into the phone. Right on cue. So what do we do? Well, I guess there's nothing we can do now that they know. I'll keep an eye on Joji's run, and if push comes to shove, I'll think of a way to intervene. All right. I'm starting to head to the end in Odawara with Jota. Is it still okay for Hana to go to Yokohama? The plan was for Hanako to spend the night in the same hotel in Yokohama that Prince was staying at. Once Joji finished the fourth leg, he would also join them, as well as Kakeru and Kyosei later in the evening. Yes, we can stick to the plan, Kyosei said. Anything you want me to say to Jota? Nothing. His run was perfect. I'll tell him that. When he hung up, Kyosei said, So, Kakeru, and cracked his neck. You and Joji better play nice tonight at the hotel. I'm not sure if Prince and I would be enough to handle a brawl between you two. Why would we fight? Kakeru asked, genuinely puzzled. Kyosei stared at him for a few moments. So in the end, you're the last one to get it, he laughed. Finally, the bus is here. Let's go. What are you talking about, Haiji? Hey, wait up. I don't know why they keep forcing Kakeru to think that he likes Hana. Kakeru does not like Hana like that. I don't understand. I'm like, manga, I was like, author, Kakeru does not like Hana. I don't know why you think that he does when he clearly likes you, Kyosei. That's so weird. Also, Jota said that he would run in the future, but maybe he just meant that he wouldn't run as much as, that he wouldn't run as far or as much as Joji. But anyway, I'm like, why are you trying to force heterosexuality onto Kakeru? He's clearly not. The two of them got on the bus, which would take the old road up to Lake Ashi. They sat side by side on the two-person seat. The bus took the roundabout route, winding along narrow roads, but it was probably a better way to go up since it wasn't as congested as National Route 1. The reception for both the TV and the radio gradually deteriorated as they became hemmed in by the mountains. Kyosei turned the radio antenna this way and that as if he were trying to strike a vein of water, before eventually deciding it was a lost cause. Looks like we can't get updates till we reach Lake Ashi. He pulled out the earbuds and leaned against the window. I just hope Joji he shakes off any impure thoughts and focuses on the run. Impure thoughts? That's a bit over the top, Kakeru said with a wry smile. So Hanako's feelings had finally reached the twins. Surely that's got to be a good thing. Yeah, it is a good thing. Then why do I feel like There's this fog hanging over me. It feels like something's gripping my chest. It's like when I'm frustrated I can't run as well as I want to. When my body can't burn all the fuel that I have unless the heat gets trapped inside. Kakeru clammed up and endured Kyose's gaze on the side of his face. Kakeru braced himself. He knew Kyose was going to tease him again. Kakeru was itching to run. He wanted to be free from hazy feelings, these fuzzy things he couldn't put into words, and feel the wind on his body. The bus was warm and stuffy with the heat on. Kakeru vaguely felt uncomfortable, the way he felt when he wanted to doze off, but he kept getting pulled back from the brink of sleep. He sank lower in his seat, wishing he could hide from Kyose's eyes. "We have to pull Joji's focus back on the race," said Kyose. His tone was more serious than Kakeru had anticipated, so he looked up. Kyose was gazing out the window, not at him. The cedar branches jutted out so close they almost touched the pane. "What would you say to Joji, Kakeru?" "Well," Kakeru thought about it a little and then gave his answer. I'm like, does Kakeru like Hana? Does he? Or, I mean, does he like her? It's weird because the book doesn't really say that he does. I thought that it was like all the moments with Kakeru and Haiji, or are we just getting queer baited? What does that mean? Does Hana really like me? Joji's head was full of Hanako. Oh, but Jota said us, didn't he? What did that even mean? Maybe he wanted to say either of us. Or did he mean Hana likes both of us as close friends? If that's what he's wanted to say, well, that's just silly. I knew that a long time ago. I like her as a friend too. And I've been thinking it'd be nice to get closer to her. But then what if she really likes me? Well, it could be Jota she likes, but what if she actually has a crush on me? Well, what do I do? That would make me super happy. Should I just go for it and try asking her out? The more Joji turned things over in his head, the wider his grin spread across his face. See, Joji's like contemplating asking her out, but Kakeru isn't even like thinking of that. Since Joji's thoughts were absorbed in a world of his own, his run was out of focus. He was totally unaware of where he was running. He didn't know he'd entered Osayo, got back on National Route 1 and passed by a row of pine trees in Tokaido. The scenery streamed by without his seeing it, his body cruising on autopilot. The fourth leg from Hiratsuka to Odawara was 20.9 kilometers long. It was one of the shorter segments of the Hakone-Ekiden, but it was still crucial to stay alert in order to pass on the Tsuki in a good position for the fifth leg uphill. The course continued past Ninomiya and Kozu on National Route 1, and the runners had to cross several small rivers that flowed into the Sagami Bay before they entered the castle city of Odawara. With every river, there was a small bridge, resulting in a slight undulation in the road. Joji was the type of runner who could get in a groove more easily with some ups and downs rather than on a flat road. So even with his wandering thoughts, he somehow managed to hold a steady pace. But now, he was missing the drive to chase after Kikui and Totai running ahead of him. The distance between him and the two runners had remained the same since they had left the Hiratsuka relay station. The only thing on Joji's mind was his wish to know how Hanako really felt about him. I'm like, Jota, why'd you have to say that? Why could you not wait till they were done? Like, you've just said how Joji's a better runner. Did you think he could handle it? But you also said he was carefree and you're more calculating. What are you doing? One feature of the fourth leg was a dramatic contrast between the first and second halves of the course. The route along the coast leading up the city streets of Odawara was relatively warm, congenial for running. But when the route left behind the city area and approached the foot of Mount Hakone, the temperature dropped sharply. The contestants had to run straight into the biting wind that swept down the mountain. The last 3 kilometers were a long, arduous climb. The last kilometer was especially steep, as though they were already on the mountain. All the facts about the course, the topography he'd researched in advance, as well as his experience from the trial run, had fallen clean out of Joji's head. He had no space in his brain to think about the course right now, let alone devise tactics for the race. Joji couldn't help it. His thoughts simply kept coming back to Hanako. In general, Joji was on the popular side. He'd gone out with a few girls in the past. He liked all of them, of course, but somehow things sort of fell apart after a while, and the relationship faded away. The cause lay in the fact that Joji had a brother who looked just like him. For example, say his girlfriend came over. When Joji answered the door, the first thing she'd say was always, Joji? The same thing happened when he was walking down the corridor at school with Jota, wearing the same uniform. Joji's girlfriend would never call him from behind. She'd circle around in the front of them to look at from one to the other and then talk to Joji. It was true the brothers looked alike, so it wasn't the subtle pause that put off Joji. He just didn't like how his girlfriend had to try so hard to tell them apart. He knew full and well that his wish was self-indulgent, that he was just being selfish and unreasonable. But he didn't have any problem with having an older brother who looked like him. In fact, when he was little, he thought it had been fun pretending to be Jota and play tricks on his friends. Even so, he tried his best to play up his Joji-ness in front of the girls he liked. Every time a girlfriend took a moment to spot the difference between them, he felt a bit hurt. It made him want to ask her, "Do you think I'd try to trick you?" None of the girls had meant any harm, and Joji knew he was overreacting. He'd never say any of this out loud. He just didn't want to be compared to his precious brother. All he wanted was to be accepted for he was, a guy who happened to have an older brother who looked just like him. In that sense, Hanako was a little unusual. She never mistook Jota for Joji or vice versa. Even when they were wearing the same tracksuit, even when they had their backs to her, she always called out each twin by the right name, as naturally as breathing. And she never pointed out the differences in their personalities either, just as someone who wouldn't go out of their way to point out the distinction between Kyosei and Kakeru. Once, Joji had gotten curious and asked, "Hey, Hana, how are you so good at telling us apart?" "Tell you apart?" Hanako tilted her head, puzzled. "You know, me and Jota. I guess we never really look alike. I guess we really look alike even for twins. Our friends at school came up to me pretty often thinking that I'm Jota." "But the people at Shikusei-so never do they?" "Well, sure, because we hang out all the time." Hanako pondered over it. It was nighttime, and they were walking back to the Yaokatsu from Shikusei-so. Jota, who was walking on the other side, seemed to be waiting for her answer with a bated breath. "I don't know. I've never thought about how to tell you apart or anything like that," she said eventually. "From the start, I always thought of you guys as brothers who were super close, and for me, it's totally normal to see you together, and, well, you're both good looking, too." "Ah!" Joji almost yelled out mid-run. "Yeah, she did say that. She did call us good looking. Maybe she really was crushing on us, though I'm still not sure which of us she likes." "Well, whichever it is, I'm happy either way," Joji thought. Nothing would change the fact that Hanako was a special person, someone who accepted him, all of him, just as he was, whether like or unlike his brother. But then again, Joji sank into a sea of thoughts. I always thought she had a thing for Kakeru. That was why he'd been shy to make a move on Hanako despite all of his affection towards her. Both at the summer camp and whenever she came over to Shikusei-so, Hanako often chatted with Kakeru. Joji knew how beautiful Kakeru's figure was when he ran. Joji felt a bit weird about describing it that way, but when he saw Kakeru run, he discovered for the first time in his life the strength and beauty of someone who dedicated himself to a sport. Kakeru might have been a track freak who probably couldn't help but march to the beat of his own drum, but there was something pure about him. Kakeru can't make friends with people as easily as I can, but he always works hard to find the right words and to get to know people and himself a little bit better. Kakeru lives the way that he runs, powerful, dead straight, inspiring hope in everyone who sees him. This is why Joji liked Kakeru, even though they got into fights. Joji always dreamed of the world where he might be able to glimpse if only he could run like Kakeru. Hanako seemed captivated by running itself, so naturally Joji assumed that she admired Kakeru as well. So they all think that Hana likes Kakeru, and Kakeru's like, "But I'm not straight." Plus, Kakeru didn't seem all that indifferent to her either. "Hey, Joji, are you listening? Oi!" The landlord's furious bark snapped Joji back to the present. "Huh? Where am I?" He looked around. He could see the Totai and Kikwi runners up ahead. He was just crossing a wide bridge over Sakagawa, 15 kilometers into the race. Soon he'd enter the streets of Odawara. "How did I get all the way here?" The cheers of the crowd took him by surprise. "Joji!" the landlord bellowed again. Joji waved a hand to signal he was listening. "Focus on the race." A Kansai student was handing him a water bottle. Joji grabbed it and splashed it over his head. He licked at the trickle of water as it traced into the corner of his mouth. "Don't ask me what it means, but here's a message from Kakeru," the landlord declared. "If you're in love, run. That's all." "You're one to talk," Joji stifled a laugh. "You don't even have a clue how you feel about her." "But you're right, Kakeru. Now's the time to run. Because I love it. I'll run for the sake of this whole crazy roller coaster year, for all the people we've met along the way. I'll run so hard that I'll soak up all the heartfelt support and repel all that heartless insults that we've gotten. I'll savor every moment of this run. The the running that we love so much. And everything else will come later. Joji sprinted through the quaint, tranquil streets of Odawara. The people of the neighborhood flocked to the course to root for them. It must be an old tradition for these townies, Joji thought. Though running might have played a little part in their daily lives, they watched the athletes running through their neighborhood as intently as if they were participating in the race themselves. I'm glad that I got to run at Hakone-Ekiden. I'm glad now that I know what it's like to run with everything I've got. When he turned right at the intersection in the Honcho district of Odawara, he caught up to Kikui at last. The wind from the mountain chilled his damp hair, but even that felt refreshing. His next target was Totai. Joji passed under the railroad bridge of the Hakone-Tozen Railway, and with the Hayakawa River flowing on his left, he finally came to the steep gradient of the last kilometer. It was grueling. Since he'd been so distracted in the first part of the course, he'd struggled to find a good rhythm. The Odaku Romantic rattled past him on the right, heading for Hakone Yumoto. Joji recalled what Kiyose had told Kakeru that summer. Is speed the only thing that matters to you? And there's no point in running. Just go on a bullet train, take a flight that's a lot faster. Back then, Joji didn't get what Kiyose meant, but now he did. If he wanted to go to Hakone, he might as well sit on the Romantic car, munching on some frozen satsuma. It was less effort and faster. But that's not the point. Where we want to go isn't Hakone. It's somewhere much further, deeper, and even more beautiful. Somewhere only running will take us. Even if I'm not ready for it just yet, I hope to see that place someday. Until then, I'll keep on running. I'll run all the way through this painful last stretch and edge my way closer to that uncharted territory. Joji didn't let the Kikui runner get away. He forgot everything else and threw himself into the run, catapulting over the unrelenting hill. A peculiar music began to drift down from the Kazamatsuri station of the Hakone-Tozen Railway, where the Odawara relay station awaited him. What's all that racket? Kiyose asked. Yuki clamped a hand over his ear and raised his voice to the phone. We've got Chikua and Handpin dancing around over here. Anyway, how's the weather looking on your end? People were swarming around Kazamatsuri Station to watch the Suzuki handoff. The relay zone was set up in the parking lot of a shop selling products from a Kamabozo company in Odawara. Human-sized surumi fish cakes, presumably they were the company mascots, were bouncing to the music. With large-barreled drums booming out of the battle beats, the carnivalesque atmosphere was almost at its peak. The fourth leg runners were beginning to arrive. Yuki was still accompanying Shindo, waiting for Joji, who would reach them soon. The National Route 1 lay between the Hakone-Tozen Railway tracks and the Hayakawa River, past the Hakone Yumoto and up towards the mountain. It's pretty cold here, Kiyose said on the other end. It's just over 39 degrees now, but the clouds are coming out. It might drop a lot more. That meant there was at least about 3.5 degrees difference in temperature between Kazamatsuri and Lake Ashi. Yuki decided that Shindo should wear a long-sleeve shirt. How's Shindo? Kiyose asked. He's in the restroom. Oh, wait, he's come back. I'll swap, Yuki called out. Shindo, it's Haiji. He waved the phone in the air. The spectators made way for Shindo as he returned from the shop's restroom, probably less because he was a Kansei member who was about to run in the race than because he stood out in his bizarre outfit. Shindo still had half his face wrapped in a towel with 2 layers of masks over it. Fever unsteadied his steps. Just pop on a helmet and he'd fit right into those Yasuda Auditorium student protest groups from the 60s, Yuki thought, holding the phone up to him. Shindo took it. Yes, I'm okay, he said in a hoarse, feverish voice that sounded far from okay. He exchanged a few sentences with Kiyose and hung up. What did Haiji say? Yuki asked. He told me to make sure I grab water at the hydration points. There was nothing else Kiyose could say. Yuki and Shindo both understood how Kiyose must be feeling. If Shindo dropped out of the race, the Kansai team's Hakone-Ekiden would come to an end there and then. Shindo had no choice but to do everything in his power to reach Lake Ashi. Shindo! Yuki! A voice called out to them over the bustle of the crowd. They turned to find the Yaokatsu owner walking towards them with Nira on a leash. Since everyone at Chikusei would be gone for these 2 days, he was looking after the dog for them. Oh, that makes sense. Nira noticed Shindo and Yuki and wagged his tail with gusto. Joji's fighting for the 10th place with Kikugi right now, Yaokatsu said. He's been waiting at the Odawara relay station with Nira since morning. Shindo gave him a quiet nod, inwardly strengthening his resolve. It was obvious that Shindo was sick. Sayokatsu didn't offer any empty words like, "Are you feeling all right?" He looked on in silence as Shindo stroked near his head. The beating of the drums grew even more frantic. The Boso runner was in first to pass on their Tasuki. Next came Daiwa, the team that was fifth at Hiratsuka, but they'd climbed up. The reigning champions of Hakone Rakudo was yet to be seen. The unexpected turn of events stirred the crowd. 20 seconds after Daiwa, Manaka came in. Another 7 seconds, Rakudo arrived at last, having fallen to fourth place. Shindo took off his bench coat and handed it to Yuki. He was wearing a silver-gray long-sleeved shirt under his running uniform. The farther he ascended Mount Hakone, the colder it would become. There were a few other runners in long sleeves, too. "Time to go." Yuki accompanied Shindo towards the changeover line, holding the jacket in his arms. Kofu Gakuen, Dochido, and, I lost my place! Manaka came in. Another 7 seconds later, Rakudo arrived at last, having... never mind. Kofu Gakuen, Dochido, and Kita Kanto passed on their Tasuki in succession. At that point, they were 4 minutes behind the leader, Boso. They still had a chance to overtake the top teams during the climb. It was a close race. Any team could come out victorious. Shindo peeled off his masks and towel. "Please put these in a bag, seal it tight, and give it to Mr. Yakatsu. It has germs on it, so don't hold on to it under any circumstances," he told Yuki. Yuki thought this sounded a bit extreme, but Shindo looked completely serious. He was probably keyed up on his turn in the race as it drew closer. If he had anything to worry about, it would get in the way of his run, so Yuki simply said, "Will do." Plus, he probably doesn't want to get Yuki sick as well, since Yuki has to run the very next day. Saiko and Totai arrived. Kikui and Kansai are up next, the staff announced. "Should I say it or not?" Yuki vacillated. But as Shindo was about to take a step towards the changeover line, Yuki stopped him, blurting out, "If it gets too hard, you can withdraw any time." Startled, Shindo turned to stare at Yuki's face. Yuki knew his words might make a fissure in Shindo, whose mind and body were already taut to the breaking point, but still he had to say it. Just for an instant, a clear light came into Shindo's feverish eyes, and Yuki met his unwavering gaze. "Nobody's going to blame you for it," Yuki pressed. "If you think you can't make it, just drop out on the spot, please." "Okay." Shindo smiled, and he went to stand in the handoff line. Joji was sprinting with all his strength, neck and neck with Kikui. Neither yielded. They even stopped breathing for the last few steps and crossed the line at exactly the same moment. "Shindo!" Joji shouted. The silver letters of Kansai sewn onto the Tasuki rippled in the wind. Shindo wordlessly gripped Joji's hand over the sash for a split second and then shot out of the relay station. "His hand was burning," Joji murmured. Shindo's hand had held much more heat than Joji's, even though he'd just run more than 20 kilometers. Joji watched him vanish into the woods, stupefied. "I'm an idiot. Why couldn't I stay more focused? I knew Shindo was sick, that he was waiting for me, believing in me. I knew all that, so why didn't I hand him the Tasuki in a better position?" The Kansai team reached the Odawara relay station 4 hours, 24 minutes, 47 seconds after they set off from Odamachi. They were now tied with Kikui in 10th place. Joji had taken 1 hour, 4 minutes, 24 seconds to run 20.9 kilometers. Out of all the four-leg runners, his time ranked 11th. Jota's time had ranked 10th, completing the 21.3 kilometers in 1 hour, 4 minutes, and 32 seconds. Considering the shorter distance as well as the difference in their abilities, Joji should have been able to run at a much better pace. Kansai had finally ascended to 10th place, but Joji only felt regret. "Good work," Yuki told him. He could see Joji wasn't satisfied with his own run, but it wasn't the kind of situation in which a bystander could casually prefer words of consolation or encouragement. Seen from the side, Joji had completed his part of the race with flying colors, an achievement that kept Kansai's hope alive. Whatever self-reproach he felt, Joji had to find some way to come to terms with himself. "Yuki, I wish I could have done better," Joji said and bit his lip. "Me too." Yuki took hold of Joji's drooping head and gave him a gentle shake. "I couldn't stop Shindo. I had to try, but in the end he went anyway." Yuki led Joji to the Yaokatsu and Nira, who waited for them away from the din of the crowd. "Chin up. No matter how hard you try, there'll be times when you fall short. But that's what makes things interesting, right?" Kansai's Hakone Ekiden, Joji's regrets and delights. These would never end. There was no way they could end. As long as he felt he couldn't reach that elusive goal, there was an infinite number of necks. Joji wiped his eyes and his fist and straightened up. You're right. Now, they would each make their way to their own destinations to do what they had to do. Yuki to Lake Ashi to prepare for his own run tomorrow, Joji to the hotel in Yokohama, Yaokatsu and Nira back to the shopping arcade in his mini pickup truck to get ready for the wrap-up party tomorrow night. The race would go on, and still more opportunities lay ahead. Joji waved at Yaokatsu and Nira and started walking towards Kazamatsuri Station with Yuki. Oh my God, this chapter is, I'm assuming we're doing the part with Shindo now, but oh my God. So that is one part that always sucked is one thing I liked about this is that you could tell the difference between the twins, between Jota and Joji. And it reminds me a lot of, there's a pair of twins in Haikyuu, and I won't spoil it for people that haven't seen Haikyuu, but their story is similar in ways to the Haikyuu twins, but different in others, but I do, Jota, who says he's not a runner as much as his brother, still gave his all and was so concentrated and focused in that moment. And then Joji, who has more talent and more potential, was the one who slacked off thinking about Hana and being in his own head. And yeah, in hindsight, if he had ran, like reading this last part of the chapter here, it was like, if you had just run a little bit faster, you could have caught up and possibly like done better for him to do that. But oh my God, this chapter is still so long. Oh my goodness. Okay. We still got a ways to go. Holy cow. Okay. Anyway, sell it up there. My throat is like getting sore from talking for nearly 2 hours straight. But I'm like, Shindo, we just got to keep going. Despite the deep chills Shindo felt all over his body, sweat kept streaming down his skin. His damp shirt felt cold in the wind, yet it didn't abate the flush of his body. Every time he took a step forward, the impact shot pain through his head, and he could barely breathe through his stuffy nose. He was taking on Mount Hakone in delirium. Every second and sensory stimulus felt distant as if his head was swarmed in some transparent shock-absorbing cushioning. Pain, torture, pain, torture. These two words whirled around in his brain, trailed down his spine, and suffused his entire body. He ran the first kilometer in 3 minutes and 30 seconds. Even for an uphill course, it was a slow pace. The Kikui runner who'd received the Tasuki at the same time as Kansai was long gone. Once he passed through the onsen district of Hakone-Yumuto at 3.5 kilometers, his surroundings began to assume the aspect of a ravine. At the Konrei-Domen tunnel, the Yokohama runner passed Shindo. The tunnel stretched along a river, and its concrete wall on the right was shaped like an arched pillar. Light streamed in through the gaps, forming a black and white world inside. Like a film with missing frames, the Yokohama runner passed him in angular movements. Shindo could only watch him go. Only once he reached the streets of Tanosawa Onsen District, which still retained the air of a bygone era, there was an onset of curves, one after another. As the road twisted and turned, it also gained in elevation by degrees. Shindo strained his bleary eyes to try to determine the trajectory of his run. He had to trace the innermost part of each curve in order to minimize the distance. Doing this with a fever sounds insane, and I wish we'd seen more of that in the actual anime because this sounds surreal and insanity. His legs felt heavy and sore. His joints might be getting inflamed from the fever, but the real climb was yet to come. Shindo passed under the Dayama Iron Bridge of the Hakone-Tozan Railway. Though his steps were shaky, he kept climbing without pause. His pace dropped to 3 minutes, 35 seconds per kilometer. He climbed the mountain along the Hayakawa River, and at the 7.1 kilometer point, he came to a hairpin turn at Ohiradai. A heavy groan escaped from the engine of the car trailing him. It looks like I'm not the only one struggling, Shindo thought dimly. This climb is tough for cars, too. He entered the Miyanoshita Onsen district and passed the Fujiya Hotel. Both sides of the narrow road were packed with vacationers spending their New Year's holiday at the well-established Hot Springs Hotel. Shindo was slipping down the ranks, and 3 teams had already outstripped him by this point. But the spectators cheered for him when he went by, yelling, "Go Kansai!" even though they were complete strangers. They'd probably seen the team on TV and were rooting for the underdog. Spurred on by the cheers, Shindo ran up the intersection at Miyanoshita and turned left. What awaited him there was a slope so steep it almost sickened him to look up at it. At 10 kilometers came Kawakian, at an elevation of 1,968.5 feet. The elevation of the city of Odawara was 131.2 feet, so that meant he had just run up an altitude difference of more than 1,800 feet in one go. This, however, was far from the end. The highest point of the National Route 1 came after the 15-kilometer point at an elevation of 2,867.45 feet. In other words, over the 20.7 kilometer of the fifth leg, the elevation increased by 3 times the height of the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building. The landlord had been quiet at the 5-kilometer point. But now, he broke his silence. Shindo, here's the thing about the game of Go. What is he talking about? Is the fever getting to my ears too? Shindo strained every nerve to listen to the old man's voice, which cracked a little in the loudspeaker. It's tricky to decide when to admit defeat. Suppose you realize that you're losing. The stronger a player you are, the more you put all your effort into devising the best way to accept defeat. You can try and venture a last-ditch maneuver to turn the tables, but if your opponent still parries your attack, that's when you surrender. Even if there are still empty spaces on the grid on the board, you end the game. But no one would criticize you if you did or accuse you of giving up in the middle of a battle. Quite the contrary, in fact. If you surrender at the right time, you'll be praised along with the victor as a wise player who knows when to surrender. Because everyone will know you persevered until the very end, till it was time to let go. Shindo realized what he meant. Are you suffering, Shindo? If you are, raise your hands. I'll get off this car right now and stop you from taking another step forward. Shindo clenched his fists and shook his head. This was the Ekiden. If all 10 runners didn't finish their run, the battle would never be over. Surrender wasn't an option. However messy and undignified he might appear, and even if he missed the prudent moment to give in, he would still run. I'll keep running as long as my legs still move. No, even if I were to collapse, I'll still crawl my way forward until I reach Lake Ashi. Sensing Shindo's determination, the landlord said no more and switched off his loudspeaker. The curves in the road up to Kawakian had allowed Shindo to just hit his stride so he could feel himself inching forward with each turn. But from here on out, there would be fewer curves and hardly any spectators. He would have to keep climbing on towards the highest point on National Route 1, a solitary runner on the desolate mountain where snow still lingered on the side of the road. He passed by the main gate of Kaimei Gakuen. His breath came out in thicker, wider clouds because of the higher altitude. It was 37.4 degrees Fahrenheit. The wind blew at 6.7 kilometers per hour from the southeast. The sky was bright and clear. Back home, his parents were probably following his route anxiously on TV. It's all right. I'm going to go home once this is over. I'll come back with Musa to tell you all about how amazing a race the Hakone-Ekiden is. At the 15-kilometer point, Shindo received a water bottle from the Kansai student and was informed that he was 17th, almost 10 minutes behind the lead. He realized he'd been overtaken by 2 more teams at some point. His throat was swollen and constricted as he gulped down the water. He hoped he might feel a little better, but the water turned lukewarm before it touched his stomach. Teams that fell more than 10 minutes behind the top teams were required to begin the same time on the second day of the race. He wanted to avoid that at all costs. The morale of his teammates who were running in the return journey depended on it. The road dipped, going downhill before rearing its head towards the peak again. Already almost spent, Shindo powered on. He punched his cramping thighs as to give himself a kick. So teams that fell more than 10 minutes behind the top team were required to begin at the same time on the second day of the race. Oh, yeah, no, we don't want that. I can't remember if that happens or not. I think it does, but the shimmering surface of Lake Ashi was coming into view. Shindo was on the last descent leading to the lake. He was no longer sure whether he was even moving forward. Footsteps pounded past. Another team had outstripped him. Unable to shift gears from uphill to downhill, Shindo couldn't accelerate. Frustration ate at him. He didn't want to lose. No matter how humiliated he looked, no matter how many teams overtook him, he didn't want to lose to himself. Not here. That was the only thing that kept his legs in motion. When he heard the crowds cheering at Moto Hakone and passed under the towering Torii Gate at 19.1 kilometers, he lost consciousness. Nothing reached Shindo's senses. Not the green of Anchi Park by the lake, nor the sight of Mount Fuji soaring beyond, nor the drums of the cheer squads beating along the final straight line of the course. Even pain was distant now. Onward, onward, onward. This single thought and single word kept echoing in his foggy brain like an incantation. It was just past noon when Kakeru and Kyosei arrived at Lake Ashi. The portable TV picked up a signal again, just as the broadcast was showing Joji running the latter half of the fourth leg. Kyosei called the landlord in the coach car and Yuki at the Odawara relay station, passing along vital messages and instructions. Kakeru, in the meantime, was gazing at the lake a little way off. With the view in front of him, Kakeru couldn't believe he'd been in a world of skyscrapers and asphalt only some hours ago. The lake gleamed silver as if it was coated by a thin sheet of ice, reflecting the sky and the gentle undulations of the surrounding mountains. A pleasure boat, designed like a pirate ship, drew a leisurely line across the lake, sending small ripples over the water. Mount Fuji, which rose over the scene, was capped in pure white snow and looked so vivid that it felt much closer than it really was. It was a tranquil, beautiful sight, so much it felt unreal. The parking lot of Lake Ashi, where the finish line of the first day of the race and the starting line of the second were located, set a stark contrast to the magnificent serenity of nature. The place was buzzing, packed with spectators and staff awaiting the fifth leg runners. It was freezing out. The cold winds were blowing over the lake, but the crowd was glued to the giant TV screen that had been set up especially for race day. Many of them were holding some refreshments, cans of beer sold at the sponsor company stalls, and bowls of steaming tanjuru prepared by locals at what resembled a big soup kitchen. The screen displayed the athletes running up the mountain road. Numerous broadcasting vehicles were working in tandem to capture all the runners from top to the very bottom, since the contestants had spread farther out once they reached the mountain. The lead was the runner from Boso, who had been the first to leave the Odawara relay station. Rakudo followed next, regaining the team's rank over the course of the climb. Despite the unforeseen turn of events in the middle of the race, the results of the first day seemed to be aligning with the pre-race predictions that Boso would finish first, beating Rakudo by a close margin. As for third place, the Daiwo runner, who had been the second to pass through Odawara, appeared to be a solid contender. Manaka, who was third, had dropped far behind. The runner attracting everyone's attention was Kikwi. Though the team had tied for 10th with Kansai at Odawara, the runner had steadily gained in rank, and on the last downhill stretch to Lake Ashi, he finally moved up to 5th place. Even though he just finished running up a steep gradient, he showed no sign of slowing down. It was almost certain that he would set a new course record. If he kept up his pace, he might even do the unprecedented and break through the wall in 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 30 seconds. Kakeru unconsciously clenched his fists. On the big screen, the camera zoomed in on Inagaki, the runner for Kikui University. He was only a second year. Of course, Kakeru's thinking of his next rival, right? Kakeru was riveted. Inagaki ran with such a light spring in his step that he didn't seem to weigh anything. Yet his run exuded power. He ran as if he were on flat land. His expression was undaunted, as though he could go even farther. He seemed to have enough strength in his reserve to run all the way up to Mount Fuji. Fujioka at Rakudo wasn't the only one. The Hakone Ekiden was a race where runners like this emerged. Athletes whom no one had heard of before, but whom burst onto the scene like comets, hurtling across the sky, embodying for all to see what it meant to run. Kakeru felt frustrated, but thrilled too. I want to run. Let me start running now. Let me taste those new heights, those unknown reaches that not even Fujioka and Inagaki have ever seen. The view changed, and Shindo appeared on the screen. Shindo was also in the spotlight now for completely different reasons. The Kansai team was now 18th, falling far behind. Shindo was on the verge of passing out because of his illness, though staggering from side to side, he forged on desperately. Shindo. Kakeru was at a loss for words when he saw his friend, blank-eyed, struggling to make out the route ahead of him. Shindo was in the middle of a battle, and no one could reach out and help him. Fighting for his own sake and for the sake of the Chikuseiso members whom he'd been running alongside for the past year. Kakeru had always thought that running was a solitary act. He still thought so now, but he was absolutely certain that it was true. But it was also true that Shindo embodied what it meant to run on a level that had nothing to do with results or records. Strength. The thought struck Kakeru. Maybe this was the strength that Kiyose was talking about. In essence, to run with strength was so different, whether in individual races or group ekiden. The power to keep moving forward in the race, in the face of pain, the courage to keep fighting the battle within oneself, the tenacity to keep striving to overcome one's own limits rather than external records. Kakeru had to admit it, Shindo was strong. If Kakeru had been running the fifth leg, Kansai would have been able to rise in the ranks, but that didn't necessarily mean Kakeru was superior to Shindo. Shindo was strong. He was sacrificing his own body for his run, showing Kakeru the kind of run to aspire to. Why do I run? Why do we run? Kakeru never took his eyes off the screen. Why can we never stop running even when it tortures us so much? Every particle of his body stirred restlessly, longing to feel even stronger gusts of wind blowing against him. Kakeru. Kakeru turned to find Kiyose standing right behind him. Can you call the inn and ask them to lay out the futon before we arrive? And if they have a doctor they're familiar with on call, ask them to contact the doctor so that they're waiting on us when we get there. Got it. Shindo was visibly dehydrated. It was a gamble whether he'd even be able to make it to the finish line. Kakeru hastily pulled out his cell phone and dialed the Lakeside Inn. Kiyose went to the event staff to request a stretcher. The cheers and anthems surged. It was 5 hours, 31 minutes, 6 seconds since the runners had left from Otemachi. At last, the Boso runner broke the finish tape at Tokyo Hakone round-trip college ekiden race. 1 minute and 39 seconds later, Rakudo finished second. Kakeru stood by the finish line with Kiyose. They couldn't see the Kansai uniform yet. The landlord told me that Shindo refused when he urged him to withdraw, Kiyose murmured. I just want him to be okay. As long as he gets here safe, I couldn't care less about our timing or ranking. One by one, the runners arrived at the goal. Their teammates welcomed them and guided them back to the parking lot, applauding their run. Kikui finished fifth. Inagaki set a new course record of 1 hour, 11 minutes, and 29 seconds. Considering how even the Rakudo runner, who was the second fastest in the leg, came in at 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 15 seconds, Inagaki's would be a difficult record for anyone to beat in the years to come. It was a historic achievement. The fear of being disqualified from the race hung over Kiyose and Kakeru. For them, the Kikui's team celebratory whoops for Inagaki's feat seemed to be coming from another world. Totai came in 7 minutes, 47 seconds behind the top team, placing 11th at 5 hours, 38 minutes, 53 seconds. The team stood well within the range to rise higher on the return journey tomorrow. The broadcaster's voice could be heard from a large screen. It's almost 8 minutes now since Boso crossed the finish line. Once 10 minutes pass, any team arriving after that will have to start at once at a designated time for tomorrow's journey back to Tokyo. How many teams will be hindered by a 10-minute wall this year? All eyes are on the finish line at Lake Ashi. As he spoke, Manaka, Tato, and Akabono arrived. Jonan Buka came in not long after, placing 15th at 5 hours, 40 minutes, and 56 seconds. This is it. Kiyose's face stiffened as he stared at the big screen. It's going to be 10 minutes past. The team showed the runner from the select teams. He was running for his life to make it across the line before the 10-minute cutoff. He dashed past the screaming swarm of people on the lakeside road and turned right at the traffic light onto the short, straight path to the finish. But time was merciless. At the very moment 10 minutes had passed since Boso made it across the line. Gasps of shock escaped the crowd. The runner knocked his head back for an instant, but snapped forward again and sprinted past the tape at full speed. The time was 5 hours, 41 minutes, and 33 seconds. Because his team was late by a margin of 27 seconds, they would have to start the race tomorrow with the other late teams at the appointed time. It's Shindo! Kakeru pointed at the screen. Shindo was running with faltering steps behind the runner from Eurasia University. Kakeru and Kiyose sprang towards the crowd to the finish line. Eurasia came in 17th at 5 hours, 42 minutes, and 34 seconds. Then finally, Shindo turned the corner at the traffic light, his Kansai uniform becoming visible in the final stretch. Shindo seemed to be following the noise of the crowd to stay on course, barely conscious of the way he was going. Every time he staggered, everyone watched, held their breath. Kakeru was dying to run up to him and hold him. Shindo was less than 40 meters away from their goal. Kakeru wanted to tell Shindo he'd done enough to carry him to the doctor, but neither was allowed. The moment a teammate reached out and touched a runner, the team would be disqualified. The only thing he could do now was watch over Shindo and call his name. Shindo, Kyosei yelled. Shindo, it's this way. You're almost there, Kakeru shouted at the top of his voice to reach Shindo over the roar of the crowd. They watched as Shindo mustered every scrap of willpower he had left in him. Shindo took the last 5 steps without wavering, planting every step firmly on the ground. As soon as he crossed the finish line, he started to crumple, but Kakeru and Kyosei were there to catch him. His body was burning like it was on fire. We need a stretcher, please, Kyosei shouted. The staff, who had been watching, stunned, rushed over with a rolled-up cloth stretcher. Kakeru splashed water from a bottle over Shindo's face, lightly slapping his cheek. Shindo, it's water. Can you drink something, please? Shindo's lips moved very slightly, so Kakeru pressed the open bottle to his mouth. But Shindo shook his head and refused. What he wanted wasn't water. He was struggling to tell them something, as if it was all that mattered. As he was laying Shindo down on the stretcher, Kakeru realized that Shindo was trying to apologize. Why? Kakeru cradled Shindo's head in his arms. He didn't want to hear that kind of thing from Shindo. You finished your run, Shindo. Isn't it that enough for us? Running means everything. The Kansai's Team Black and Silver Tsuki had journeyed 107.2 kilometers from Tokyo to Hakone and had reached Lake Ashi. There was nothing more to desire. Out of 20 teams, Kansai concluded the first day of the race in 18th place. It was 5 hours, 42 minutes, 59 seconds after the team had started from Otomachi. A difference of 11 minutes, 53 seconds separated them from the leading team. Can you please take him to Asahara Inn? He needs immediate medical attention, Kyosei told the staff, and they carefully lifted the stretcher. A doctor who lived nearby was waiting to see them at the inn. It was a miracle he ran at all, he remarked, shaking his head in astonishment. He's got a dreadful cold, and he took a double blow of fatigue and dehydration on top of that. No wonder he's knocked out. Well, he's young and strong, so I don't think I have to worry about developing into pneumonia. Just make sure he gets plenty of rest tonight. The doctor stayed until the IV drip was finished, and then he went home. Kakeru and Kyosei nursed Shindo. Together, of course! The landlord, who arrived in the coach car, and Yuki, who finally made it to Lake Ashi once the traffic restrictions were removed, all gathered around his futon. Shindo slept like a rock in their hotel bed. When the clock struck 3 in the afternoon, he finally opened his eyes, and the first words he uttered was mask. Kakeru took out the masks he brought from his pocket. Shindo put one on and slowly sat up on the futon. I'm sorry, Shindo said. I've been nothing but trouble. No, it's me who should be apologizing. Kyosei cut him off firmly. I didn't realize how much you had on your plate. I basically made you our spokesperson, even though I knew you were tired. I'm sorry I pushed you too hard. If they were left to themselves, Kyosei and Shindo might have gone on apologizing to each other forever. Kakeru tried to think of something he could do to persuade them that it was nobody's fault. Now, the landlord said to the downcast pair. Kakeru hoped he might tap some wisdom of his age and say something of resolve in the situation, but instead, in a grave manner, he said, in any case, tomorrow is going to be an uphill battle. Rather than mollifying the two, his words rubbed salt into the wounds. No, it won't, Kakeru snapped, throwing a threatening look at the old man. Because I'm going to run, right? The landlord teased him and then sat up straight. Every race throws curveballs. It comes with the territory. What I'm talking about is support. Keeping your teammates company and making sure they're in good shape before the race is an important job. If Shindo's like this, who's going to look after Yuki before he runs the 6th leg? I have to go in the coachmobiles, so I can't be there. No need to worry, Yuki finally spoke up. I like to think I don't need somebody babysitting me to be able to run a race. My nerves aren't that fragile. Shindo can stay here and rest, no problem. No, Shindo shook his head. He wouldn't lie down again, so Kakeru draped Musa's bench coat, which he'd been carrying all this time, on Shindo's shoulders. Shindo gripped the jacket over his chest. I'll be fine in the morning, he said, determined. I'll look after Yuki before the race. It's my responsibility. The landlord studied Shindo's face for a few moments and then gave a nod. All right. Then we'll let Shindo take care of Yuki as planned. Agreed, Haiji? Kyosei looked down. After a pause, he said yes. Now that that's settled, we should call the others, Kakeru said, trying to put on a cheerful voice. I'm sure they're all worried about Shindo. They must be waiting for news. Kakeru called Prince and Joji in Yokohama. Yuki called Musa and King in Fujisawa. And Kyosei called Jota and Nico in Odawara. Huddled around in a circle, they brought their phones close together so all 10 of them could talk at once. Are you okay, Shindo? Musa cried out as soon as he picked up the phone. We have so much time on our hands now. I've already finished reading all the manga I've brought. Prince complained. Jota won't shut up about how hungry he is, and it's driving me nuts, Nico grumbled. Can we go out for some kamaboko? Hey, I want some too. Can you get some for me, bro? Joji chimed in. One at a time, guys. Kiyose barked at all the phones. First, Musa, Shindo's doing just fine. Yuki handed his call over to Shindo. Shindo and Musa praised each other's perseverance. Kiyose turned to Kakeru's phone next and called out, Prince! Has Hanako arrived at the hotel already? Oh, she checked in a little while ago. She said she'll pop over to our room later. The twins know about Hanako now, Kiyose informed him. Huh? Try not to leave Joji and her alone together until Kakeru and I get over there. Well, how come? Prince was clearly getting a kick out of this. What if Joji gets carried away and asks her out or something? It might have repercussions for the race tomorrow. Kiyose glanced at Kakeru as he spoke. Again, why do you look at me? Kakeru retorted in his head. Gotcha, Prince snickered. Right, everyone gather around your phones, Kiyose said. Kakeru put all 3 phones on speaker and lined them up on Shindo's futon. He could sense everyone leaning in on the other end. You all fought well today, Kiyose began. Kansai made it to Hakone in 18th place. It's not a great position, but there's still hope to turn things around tomorrow. Yeah, a drawn-out cheer came from the other end. They sound like they were trying to stifle their enthusiasm. Kakeru chuckled to himself. We really are a stubborn bunch. Or more like shy, I guess. Those of you running tomorrow, be extra careful about keeping yourself warm tonight. Don't eat too much. That's it from me. It is? King blurted out. Don't you have something a bit more, constructive to tell us? Nope. Kiyose smiled. When you've come this far, all that matters now is sharpening your focus so you can give your best performance. So this is it, huh? It'll all be over tomorrow, Joji said, sounding a bit emotional. Stop it, Joji. You're going to make us all sad, Jota sniffled. Kakeru looked at the row of phones. See you at Otamachi, everyone, he told them, letting those simple words carry everything he felt. See you there. What kind of expressions would he see on their faces when they saw each other again at Otamachi? Kakeru couldn't wait to find out. It was the first time he'd ever felt this way, to be so excited to see someone, to be eager to run towards something, a place where someone was waiting for him, to get there as fast as possible. I've never felt anything like this before. The delight of running, the sense of purpose that surpassed all pain, blazing in his core, unquenchable. They would throw themselves into the race, all for the sake of reuniting at a destination, bound by the thrill of having run as one. Tomorrow we'll fight again with everything we've got. The Tokyo Hakone round-trip college Ekiden race was only at its halfway point. Oh my God. We just let this a little bit go. Okay. Kakeru and Kiyose left Legashi. They had to trace their steps back to the hotel in Yokohama. Since the landlord had told them to preserve their energy, they took a taxi down the mountain to Odawara Station using some cash that he'd given them. Kiyose was silent in the car. Kakeru guessed he was thinking about how the race would unfold tomorrow, so he stayed quiet as to not disturb him. The undulating mountain road was already dipped in the color of night. Occasionally, the lights of the city flickered through the branches, spreading out over the world below. Sure is getting chilly. We might see some snow tomorrow, the driver murmured. Even a slight snowfall meant the surface of the road would freeze over. If it snowed enough to stick, the road down the mountain would be transforming into a winding ski slope. Would Yuki be safe to sprint down? Kakeru leaned close to the window, feeling the cool air of the evening through the glass. The dark sky was covered in thick white clouds. From Odawara, they took the train on the Tokaido line. There were no commuters on board, and the train car rattled on quietly. Illuminated by orange lights, Kiyose and Kakeru sat next to each other in a 4-seat booth. We didn't get to jog much today, Kakeru said. Yeah, how about we jog around the hotel later? After the long day, punctuated by intense moments of tension and exaltation, their conversation became fitful. Kakeru began to feel drowsy. Swayed by the rhythm of the train, he found himself nodding off. Yeah, they've done stuff all day long. To run after all of that is insane. Just as he was about to be sucked into deep sleep, he heard Kiyose softly call his name. Yes? When Kakeru turned to look at him, Kiyose had his eyes fixed on his hands, clasped together in a lap as if in prayer. Your name is perfect for you. Kakeru was confused. His name, written with the kanji for run, could mean to run fast, but he couldn't figure out why Kiyose would bring that up now. My pops used to do track too, though I think he quit running once he graduated from high school and got a job. Was it your father that got you into running? No, not really. It was only after Kakeru had joined the track team in junior high that he began to sense his father's expectations for him. He got into high school on a sports referral. When he quit the track team there, he and his father stopped speaking. Even when the Chikusei-so team had won a place to compete in the Hakone-Ekiden, his father hadn't given him a call. What's on your mind? Kakeru asked. What does he want to tell me? It looks like it was really a gamble to tackle Hakone with just 10 of us, Kiyose said, subtly avoiding Kakeru's question. They say strange beasts dwell in Mount Hakone after all, but I ended up putting too much on Shindo. No, on all of you, just because I was stubborn. Kiyose heaved a deep sigh, which shook Kakeru. He didn't really get where Kiyose was going with this, but he could tell Kiyose was feeling down. What now? What do I do? Kakeru thought desperately, racking his brain for something to say, and he blurted out, well, it's too late for that. The moment he realized that, he realized it didn't sound comforting at all, which made him panic even more. What I mean is, we already know from the beginning that we only had 10 members. Kakeru stammered, trying his best to string his words together. We knew that, but we still came this far. Besides, we're not just 10. We have people from the shopping arcade, our friends at Kansai, they're supporting us, rooting for us. You're right. I'd forgotten about that. Kiyose sighed again. This time, it was more like he was taking a deep breath to let fresh air fill his body. Kakeru, my father coaches track at a high school back in my hometown. Oh. Kakeru nodded along, though he was still perplexed. Kiyose was always so logical and rational, but tonight, he seemed to be flitting randomly from one subject to another. For me, running was always a part of my life. Something I'd always been meant to do ever since I was born, Kiyose continued. His face, slightly downcast, looked somewhat pale, outlined by the dark window behind him. Kakeru focused all his attention on Kiyose to discern what he was trying to tell him. My parents had an arranged marriage, Kiyose said. From what I've heard, my father mainly chose my mother because she seemed like she wouldn't get fat as she got older. Huh? The corner of Kiyose's mouth twisted up a little. Genes for obesity are a runner's mortal enemy. That was his logic. Then he met my mother's parents and saw they were thin too, and that sealed it for him. All to create an ideal child for running. It's a bit out there, right? So he's basically Todoroki. It's pretty damn crazy. If he was honest, where Kakeru saw a woman on the street, what does it say there? I'm gonna go back to that. If he were honest, when Kakeru saw a woman on the street or an idol on TV, what drew his attention first and foremost was how fleshy she was. For a runner, it was a sin to get fat. Since he himself was constantly alert to the shape of his own body, he couldn't help but immediately check whether a girl had excess flab. It seemed to him, of all people in the world, the ones most concerned about their weight were, in fact, long-distance runners, not women who made brief attempts at dieting. But even Kakeru had never thought about the physique of his hypothetical future child. If he fell in love with a girl who happened to be chubby, he wouldn't forget about her just because of that. He found it hard to believe anyone would choose a wife based on whether she seemed unlikely to gain weight. Good on you, Kakeru! Well, just like he wanted, I can eat all I want and never get fat. Kiyose rubbed his face with his hands. My father's not a bad man, but he fixates on one thing and thinks it rules over everything else. That's the way he operates. A true track fanatic. Kakeru didn't say anything. He knew he had no right to point a finger at anyone. Kiyose dropped his hands to his lap again and looked up at the empty luggage rack. I went to the high school where my father worked and ran on his team. He's the kind of coach that you don't like, Kakeru. A control freak with the students. He made me run all the time, day in, day out, but I couldn't say anything to him. Even when I started feeling some weird discomfort in my leg, unlike you, I wasn't brave enough to stand up to him. The train came to a halt at a small station. The doors opened and closed without anyone getting on or off, and the train started moving again. That fight I had with my old coach, Kakeru muttered, squeezing out his voice. It didn't have anything to do with bravery. I just couldn't control my feelings, that's all. I wasn't totally serious about running. Kyosei looked back down. I figured if I just did what the grown-ups told me and ran whatever distances that were required, I'd get faster. I wasn't putting my whole soul into running like you are. The only small act of rebellion I could do was to choose a university that I liked that didn't have a strong track team. Kyosei stroked his right knee with his palm, moving his hand slowly, as if all the pain of his past was buried there. When I couldn't run anymore for the first time in my life, I wanted to run from the bottom of my heart. This time, I wanted to think for myself instead of being ordered around. I wanted to run toward a dream with other people who were also driven by real desires to run. Haiji, I couldn't have asked for better candidates than the people at Aotake. I wanted to prove it, that even if it's a tiny underdog team, a bunch of amateurs, they can run as long as they have the drive to. I wanted to prove that they don't have to be puppets to run on their own 2 feet, no matter where, no matter how far. I've always dreamed of proving it at the Hakone Ekiden. Kakeru closed his eyes. Kyosei must have had this ambition ever since he came to Kansai 4 years ago. His sheer determination broke against Kakeru like cold, wild waves. When you ran past me that night, Kyosei said quietly, I thought I found the one. I wanted to shout out, my dream is here, running right in front of my eyes. As I chased you on that bike, I realized right away that you were Kakeru Kurihara from Sendai Josai. I decided to rope you in, knowing who you are and how you had nowhere else to go. Why would you tell me this now? Kakeru thought. Kyosei's scrupulousness was both comical and cruel. He wouldn't have minded if Kyosei had kept the truth hidden and let him keep believing the lie. That Kyosei had called out to Kakeru because he seemed to be running free and enjoying it. That Kyosei hadn't even noticed who Kakeru was. Haiji. Kakeru opened his eyes and looked at Kyosei. You taught me everything. Where I belong, the path I should take. You taught me how to think for myself. The train was slowing down. They were approaching Yokohama Station. Kakeru got to his feet and grabbed Kyosei's arm and pulled him up. Just know that I'm grateful to you for that. They got off the train and walked through the crowded underground passage towards the east exit. Hey, Haiji, Kakeru said under his breath, as though he was telling Kyosei a special secret. Let's run tomorrow. Like we've never run before. No amount of lies or ulterior motives from the past could destroy the trust and passion they'd built up together. No beast obstructing their way could make them falter or flee now. Tomorrow was the day their dream would come true. All that remained was to run to their heart's content. Yeah, let's do it, Kakeru. The two of them looked at each other and laughed. Then, side by side, they broke into a run and sprinted down the streets to the hotel. Oh my God! Oh, I've talked for nearly oh my God, no wonder my throat is like... I've talked for like nearly 2.5 hours. Oh my God. Chapter 10 is called Meteor. Oh my God. Like comets. I mean, okay. I don't understand why they keep pushing this Kakeru likes Hana agenda and he doesn't realize that he likes Hana. Kakeru does not like Hana. Kakeru likes Haiji, and the two of them just ran off together. Basically, if they'd been holding hands, it would have sealed the deal. I mean, I know they all tease Kakeru like he likes Hana, but from all the monologues we have of him, he does not like Hana, at least not romantically. I think he likes her as a friend or a sister, but Haiji is clearly the one that Kakeru likes, so I don't know where the story is going with him liking Hana, but oh my God. Well, I would talk more about these chapters, but my throat is like raw from speaking for 2 hours straight, and I'm gonna have to let it rest. Much like these runners, but oh my God. I will say this, as far as the chapters go for this portion of it, I feel like the only chapter that the anime does better, or the only part of this chapter the anime does better, is Shindo's part as far as the emotion goes, which the anime does a really good job of building up that emotion throughout. But the other parts with Musa, with Jota, with Joji, and with Prince, I would argue, no, Prince's part is handled. I think Prince and Shindo's parts are much more emotional in the anime, and I like them more. But Musa and the twins, I think their parts in the novel are handled really, really well. And I like how they're written here. But, oh my God. I am so ready for next week because that's my favorite part. Like, I love King and Nico's parts as well. But Yuki's part is one of my favorites. And then, of course, Kakeru and Haiji. So, oh my God. What a race. I love how Kakeru and Haiji traveling to go meet them was like the thread throughout this entire chapter. And of course, it's the two of them together. So, oh. And we finally got Haiji's backstory as it was in the anime in this part here. So, oh my God. Well, I can't wait to hear what happens next week for the finale when we get chapter 10 in the epilogue. But I'm curious to hear your thoughts down below. I'm glad you joined me in this reading of chapter 9 of Run with the Wind, the novel. So in the meantime, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe. Take care. Take care of yourself this winter. And I'll be back next week for the finale of Run with the Wind, the novel. Bye.